Charlotte Hale had $3, a carpet bag, and nowhere left to run when she stumbled onto the Broken Spur Ranch on that blistering August afternoon. She had practiced her plea 100 times on the long ride west. Any job, anything honest. But when a tall cowboy with eyes like flint looked her over, he said something she never saw coming. Only if you will marry me by sunset. Right then, she realized the West was not salvation. It was a gamble, and the sun was already sinking low over that Arizona horizon. Now, y'all stay with me until the end of this story, and tell me in the comments what town you are listening from, so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The dust had barely settled from the stagecoach wheels when Charlotte Hale knew she had made a terrible mistake. Phoenix was not the glittering frontier town the pamphlets had promised. It was a collection of sun-scorched buildings that squatted in the desert like tombstones. The streets were churned into a fine powder by wagons and horses. And the heat, Lord, the heat was everywhere. It made her proper Philadelphia corset feel like a cage of hot iron. She stood on that wooden sidewalk outside the depot, clutching her carpet bag with both hands, watching the coach that brought her 2,000 miles disappear into a big cloud of red dust. Gone. Everything was gone. Charlotte closed her eyes against the sun, but the memory was still there. Her father's study and the big mahogany desk where he took his own life. She remembered the letter from his business partner telling how the Hale family name had been ruined by theft. The funeral had been a small, quiet affair. The creditors were like vultures, and Richard Peaton, the man she was engaged to for 2 years, sent his regrets through a maid. We simply cannot be associated with scandal, the note said. Miss Hale, surely you understand. Oh, she understood perfectly. She knew that high society in Philadelphia would rather see her starve in the street. They would not soil their fancy gloves to help a woman who had fallen on hard times. So she sold everything that was not already taken. Her mother's favorite pin, her grandmother's silver, even her engagement ring. She bought a ticket west, hoping to find work as a teacher or a governess. But Phoenix was a disappointment. The town had 3 schools, and all 3 had turned her away that very morning. She had no references, no family, no one to speak for her, just a desperate woman with pretty handwriting and a story that smelled an awful lot like trouble. Charlotte opened her eyes and counted her money again. $347. The boarding house cost 50 cents a night. Food was at least another $1 a day. The way she figured it, she had about a week before she was sleeping in an alley. Think, Charlotte, you have to think. The newspaper office was not hiring. The general store was not hiring. The hotel needed maids to clean rooms. But the manager looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl. She walked right out before he could finish his offer. She had 6 days of money left, and for the first time, she was starting to understand why good women were sometimes forced to make desperate choices. It was the woman at the boarding house, Mrs. Kowalski, a strong Polish immigrant with kind eyes, who suggested the ranches. Lots of men out there need help, she had said, as she folded Charlotte's one good dress. Cooking, cleaning, keeping the books. Sometimes they need someone to teach the children. Yes, maybe someone needs that. Charlotte asked her, how far are the ranches? Some are close, some are far. The Broken Spurs may be 8 miles north. Widow Henley's place is closer, but I heard she already hired 2 girls. Mrs. Kowalski paused then, studying Charlotte's face. Are you running from something, honey? Charlotte replied, isn't everyone out here? The older woman smiled a sad smile. I suppose that is true enough. Do you want to borrow my husband's map? The roads are not great, but you can ride a horse, can't you? The truth was, Charlotte could not ride. She had never been on a horse in her life, but she just nodded her head yes, because what other choice did she have? The stable charged 50 cents to rent a gentle mare for the day, plus another 20 cents for a deposit. Charlotte handed over the coins. She let the stable boy help her into the saddle, praying she would not fall off and break her neck before she even found a job. The mare, a patient gray animal named Buttercup, seemed to know her rider was brand new at this. She moved with slow, careful steps through the edge of town and onto the dusty road that headed north. The landscape was like nothing Charlotte had ever seen before. Just endless stretches of sand and scrub brush broken up by strange cactuses that reached for the cloudless sky like the arms of drowning men. The mountains rose up in the distance, looking all purple and hazy in the heat. Shimmer. Hawks circled high above, riding heat waves she could not feel. The sun beat down like a hammer, and in just 20 minutes her blouse was soaked clean through. She rode past 2 ranches on her way. The first one, Widow Henley's place, was all staffed up, or so the suspicious foreman told her at the front gate. At the second ranch, a man shouted from the porch that they needed proper ranch hands, not some city girl playing cowgirl before she could even swing a leg off her horse. By the time Charlotte saw the wooden sign that read Broken Spur Ranch hanging from a tired old post, she was sunburned, parched, and fighting back tears. The dusty road curved around a stand of cottonwood trees, and then she saw it. A whole spread of buildings laid out around a main yard. The main house was made of adobe and timber, 2 stories tall with a porch that wrapped all the way around. Behind it was a big barn, some other buildings, and corrals with horses. And way out in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the dry, brown grass. Charlotte nudged Buttercup forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her 5th try. This one just had to work out. There were 3 men in the yard. 2 were mending a fence and another was hauling water buckets toward the barn. They all stopped their work to stare as she rode in. Charlotte sat up straighter, trying her best to look capable instead of plain desperate. That was hard to do when her hair was falling down and her dress looked like it had been through a dust storm. "Can I help you, miss?" The man with the water bucket set them down, wiping his hands on his breeches. He was a young fella, maybe 20, with sun-tanned skin and curious eyes. "I'm looking for the owner," Charlotte said. She was mighty pleased her voice didn't tremble. "I'm here seeking employment." The 2 men at the fence shot each other a look. The young man just grinned. "Employment doing what exactly?" "Whatever you need," she said. "I can read, write, and do figures. I handled my father's accounts for 3 years. I can also cook." That part was a bit of a stretch, but she figured she could learn. "And I'm a quick study." "We've got to cook," one of the fence menders called out, "and the boss handles his own books." Charlotte's little bit of hope started to fade. "Is there nothing at all? I'll work just for a place to stay and food to eat, to start." "Tommy, who is this?" The voice came from behind her. Charlotte turned around in the saddle, and her breath just caught in her throat. The man walking from the barn was tall, well over 6 foot. He was built solid the way a man gets from hard work, not from some fancy gym. He had on dusty work clothes and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. She could see old scars on his forearms. His hair was black and a little too long, and his face was all sharp angles and a straight nose. His lips were set in a line. It made her think he wasn't a man who smiled much. But it was his eyes that truly stopped her. They were gray as a storm cloud, and you could not read a thing in them. "She's asking about work, boss," Tommy said. "I was just telling her we're all set." The boss looked up at Charlotte with those flat gray eyes, and she felt like he was sizing her up. Not like a man looks at a woman, but like a rancher looks at a horse he might buy. He was checking for faults, figuring her value, deciding if she was worth the trouble. "I can pay my own way," Charlotte said real quick. "I am not looking for a handout. I have skills. I can handle letters, contracts, and keeping track of supplies." "You ever worked a ranch before?" His voice was low and had a rough edge to it. "No, but..." "Ever lived anywhere but a city?" "No, but I learned fast." "Can you shoot a rifle, brand a calf, or ride for 10 hours straight?" "I can learn to," she insisted. "No." He turned his back on her, dismissing her like she was a fly. A hot panic rose up in Charlotte's chest. She slid off the horse. Well, she nearly fell, her legs all cramped up, and she hurried after him. "Wait, please, Mr. Blackthorne. Mr. Blackthorne, please listen. I came all the way from Philadelphia. My father passed away. I have no one and nothing left. I am educated, I am honest, and I am desperate. Desperate enough to ride 8 miles into this desert on a horse I barely know to beg a stranger for a job. Surely that has to count for something." He stopped walking. He did not turn, but he stopped. The other men in the yard were dead silent, just watching. Charlotte pressed on. "I will work harder than any man you have. I will do anything you ask. All I need is one chance, just one." Blackthorne stood there for a long moment, Yimkin, his back still to her. Charlotte held her breath, waiting. Then, ever so slowly, he turned to face her. Those gray eyes were sizing her up again. But this time they held something new. It was not pity. She reckoned this man did not have much pity in him, but maybe calculation. "Are you desperate enough to do whatever it takes?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, whatever it takes." Something in his tone gave her pause, but she had come too far to turn back now. "Within reason." The corner of his mouth twitched, but it was not quite a smile. "I have a problem, Miss Hale." "Charlotte Hale, I have a problem, Miss Hale. I am trying to file a homestead claim on the land just north of here. 160 acres, and it comes with water rights. It is good land, but there is a snag." He paused, his eyes never leaving her face. "The Homestead Act, well, it favors married folks. And there is another man, Harlan Crane, who has been trying to snatch that same parcel for months. I am set to file my claim next week. If I am married, I go right to the front of the line. If I am single, Crane's lawyers will tie things up until he finds a way to steal it right out from under me." Charlotte's stomach felt like it was tied in a knot. "I do not see what this has to do with—" "I need a wife, Miss Hale, by next Friday. That gives me 8 days." The whole world seemed to tilt on its side. Are you asking me to marry you? A complete stranger?" "A business deal," Blackthorne corrected her. "You need a job and a roof over your head." "I need a wife on paper to secure my land. We get married. I file the paperwork, and you have a chuff for as long as you want it. You will have a room, food, and fair wages. Once the claim is approved, or if you decide you want to leave, I will arrange for a divorce. No mess, no scandal. You will leave with good references and enough money to get a fresh start somewhere else." Charlotte just stared at him, sure she had heard him wrong. "You want me to marry you for a piece of land? I want to offer you a contract. The marriage is just the legal part of it." He crossed his arms and waited. "But I need your answer by sundown. If you say no, I will ride into Phoenix tonight and find somebody else. If you say yes, we go to the courthouse tomorrow morning and make it legal. That is just plumb crazy. That is the West, Miss Hale. Folks do what they have to do to survive. You said you were desperate enough to do anything. I meant work. Honest work. Your duties would include representing the ranch at town events when needed. The only real difference is a piece of paper saying we are married." He glanced at the sun, which was sinking low toward the mountains. "You have until sunset, that is about 3 hours." Charlotte's head was spinning. This was pure madness. This was $347. 5 days until she was out on the street. "Why me?" she managed to ask. "You do not know a single thing about me. I know you have had some schooling. I know you are desperate, and you are honest enough to admit it. And I know you rode 8 miles by yourself to ask a stranger for a job, which tells me you have more grit than most people." Blackthorne's face did not change. "I do not need love, Miss Hale. I am not looking for romance. I need a legal wife who will not ask a lot of questions or cause any trouble, and who will not expect more than what I am offering. Can you be that woman? Could she?" Charlotte looked out at the ranch. The buildings were baking in the afternoon sun under a huge, empty sky that seemed to swallow everything up. She thought about Philadelphia, the closed-up house, the whispers, and how Richard Peeton had been such a coward. She thought about sleeping on the streets in Phoenix, and about what happens to women out here with no money and no one to protect them. "What if," she swallowed hard, "what if you are a cruel man? What if you raise a hand to me?" For the first time, something flickered in those gray eyes. It was not warmth, but maybe it was understanding. "I will not. You have my word on it. The word of a stranger. The word of a man who needs you just as much as you need him." He motioned toward the house. "Take a look around. Go talk to my men if you like. Tommy over there will tell you I am a hard boss, but a fair one. Miguel," he nodded to one of the men mending a fence. "He has worked for me for 5 years. They can tell you the kind of man I am. Then you can decide." It was more than she ever expected, more decency than Richard had ever shown her before he threw her away. Charlotte walked over to Tommy, who was watching them with great interest. "Is he telling the truth?" she asked him quietly. "About being fair." Tommy shrugged. "The boss is tough, no doubt, but he is a square dealer. He pays on time and does not cheat you. He lost his temper with me one time when I left a gate open and the horses got out. But he did not hit me or anything. He just made me fix it and told me to be smarter. Has he ever hurt anyone? A woman? No, ma'am. Tommy shook his head hard. The boss does not even go to the saloons in town. He works. He sleeps. Then he works some more. We always said he is married to this place. He just grinned, like he knew something she did not. So Charlotte went and talked to the other ranch hands. They all told her a similar story. Wade Blackthorne was a tough boss, no doubt about it. He could be short-tempered, they said, but he was as honest as the day is long. He demanded a hard day's work, but he paid a fair wage for it. One man, Miguel, told her Wade once rode through a lightning storm just to fetch a doctor for his sick little girl. From what everyone said, he was exactly who he seemed to be, just a man trying to carve out a life in this tough country. She walked back over to where Blackthorne was waiting. He stood there, as patient as a stone. The sun was getting low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. She figured she had about 2 hours of daylight left. If I agree to this, Charlotte said, choosing her words with care, what exactly would my duties be? He laid it out plain. Besides the legal side of it, you will run the house. We have a cook, Maria, but she will need you to oversee things. You will help with the account books when I need you to. You will host dinner when business partners come to visit, and you will need to be at my side for any social events tied to this land claim. He stopped for a moment, then added, you will have your own private room. This is a business arrangement, Miss Hale, nothing more. A huge wave of relief washed over her. And when the claim is final, he continued, you can leave with good references and 6 months' pay, or you can choose to stay on as a paid employee. The choice will be yours. This whole thing was just crazy, completely and utterly crazy. Charlotte had been raised to believe that marriage was a sacred bond. She thought it was supposed to be about love and building a life together. This proposal was none of that. It was just a contract, a simple business deal wearing a wedding veil. But for her, it was also about survival. I will need a guarantee, she said, her voice firm. Something in writing. A separate contract, she clarified, that spells out all the terms we just discussed. One of Blackthorne's eyebrows lifted just a little. It seemed she had finally surprised him. Agreed, he said. We can write it up tonight. And if you break the terms, if you try to... I will not, he cut in. His voice was flat and final. But if it helps you feel more secure, we can add a penalty clause. If I break our agreement, you will get half the value of this homestead on top of your wages. The offer was more than generous. It was so generous, it made her suspicious. Why would you offer that, she asked. Because I need you to trust me enough to say yes, he said. And I do not have time to waste on a long courtship. A flicker of dark humor crossed his face. And because I mean every word I say, Miss Hale, I am not looking for a wife. I am looking for a business partner who just happens to have my last name. Charlotte looked at the setting sun, then at the ranch house, looking so solid and real in the golden light. She looked at Wade Blackthorne, this hard-faced stranger, who was offering her the impossible. He was offering her safety, a schwabo, and a future. A future where she would not have to sell her soul to survive in some Phoenix boarding house. She thought about her poor father and the desperation that drove him to take his own life. She thought about her mother, gone 5 years now, who always said Charlotte had her grandmother's stubborn streak and her grandfather's heart for a gamble. I'm sorry, Mama, she thought, but this wild country has made a gambler out of me after all. Yes, Charlotte said, her voice clear. I will marry you. Blackthorne's face did not change one bit, but she saw his shoulders relax just a little. We ride for Phoenix at dawn. The courthouse opens at 8 o'clock. We can be married and back here by noon. He turned toward the house, but then he paused. You will need a proper dress. Something suitable for a wedding. I have one, she said. It is not fancy, but it is respectable. Good enough, he nodded. He started for the house again, then stopped one last time. Miss Hale? Yes? You made the right choice. Charlotte watched him walk into the house and prayed he was right. She had just agreed to marry a man whose first name she had only learned 10 minutes ago. A man with eyes as cold as a winter sky, who talked about marriage like other men talk about buying cattle bone. But as the sun finally set, Tommy showed her to a small, clean room in the ranch house. And as she settled in for the night, Charlotte realized something strange. She was not afraid of him. Oh, she was terrified of the decision she had just made, and she was completely uncertain about the future. But she was not afraid of Wade Blackthorne. There was an honesty in his tough exterior, something you could trust in how blunt he was. He offered her a solid contract, not flowery poetry. He gave her terms, not empty promises. And somehow that felt more real than anything Richard Peyton ever whispered to her, with his pretty words dressed up in flowers and moonlight. Later that evening, Charlotte found herself sitting at the kitchen table with Blackthorne and Maria. Maria was a sturdy woman from Mexico with streaks of silver in her hair. She had been told about the arrangement and, to Charlotte's surprise, took the news completely in stride. And she ate the best meal she'd had in what felt like forever. Afterwards, Blackthorne pulled out some paper and ink, and they got down to business. To her surprise, he was more than fair. He promised 6 months' wages if things went south, and guaranteed her a separate room. He even put in a penalty, a big one, if he ever crossed a line. And she could leave whenever she wanted. All she had to do was give 1 month's notice. "You're being mighty generous," Charlotte said, reading it all. "Most men would not be. Most men would take advantage." Blackthorne just signed his name with a flick of his wrist. "I am not most men, Miss Hale. I just need you to stay." She wrote her own name, the ink drying on the page like a brand. Charlotte Hale, soon Charlotte Blackthorne. The idea was so wild, she had to stop herself from laughing out loud. "Something funny?" Blackthorne asked. "Just thinking, 24 hours ago I was on a stagecoach. I was practicing how to ask for a teaching job. Now I'm signing a marriage contract with the rancher I just met. This is not how I pictured my life." "How did you picture it?" he asked. Charlotte paused. "Honestly, I stopped picturing anything after my daddy passed away. The future just became something to get through." Blackthorne was quiet for a bit. "Well, out here, the future is what you make it. Nobody cares who you were back east, only who you are right now." "And who am I now?" His gray eyes met hers. "You're someone who said yes when most would have run. Someone brave enough to take a chance on a stranger." He folded the contract and gave her a copy. "Get some rest, Miss Hale. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Charlotte took the paper and went to the small room Maria had fixed up. It was simple, just a bed and a washstand, but it was clean and cool in the evening air. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the new sounds of the ranch, the horses moving around. She heard an owl hunting in the dark. Tomorrow she would marry Wade Blackthorne. She'd be a wife, even if it was just on paper. Her whole life was about to change. But tonight, for the first time since losing her father, Charlotte felt something other than sadness. She felt a glimmer of hope. A dangerous, scary, but real glimmer of hope. The sun rose hot and golden over the Arizona desert. Charlotte woke up when Maria knocked softly on her door. She put on her good gray dress, the one from her father's funeral. She pushed that sad memory away and pinned up her hair with shaky fingers. In the mirror, her face looked pale and tired, but her eyes were determined. "You can do this." The ride to Phoenix took 3 long hours. Blackthorne drove the whole way in silence. Charlotte did not try to make small talk. She was too busy trying to keep her own heart from beating out of her chest. He helped her down from the wagon, and they walked into the courthouse together. The ceremony was over in less than 10 minutes. A board clerk just read the words from a book. Blackthorne said, "I do," in a steady voice. Charlotte's own voice shook just a little. There were no flowers, no music. There were no guests, just 2 strangers making a deal, with a clerk who looked like he had seen much stranger things. "You may kiss the bride," the clerk said, already reaching for his next bit of paperwork. Charlotte's heart jumped. She had forgotten about that part. She looked up at Blackthorne. He just studied her face with that serious expression. Then he leaned down and his lips brushed hers for barely a second. It was not a real kiss. It was just a formality. "Congratulations," the clerk said, sounding like he could not care less. He handed them the marriage certificate. "Next." And just like that, Charlotte Hale was now Charlotte Blackthorne. They walked out into the bright Phoenix morning. Now husband and wife, Charlotte felt strangely numb inside. He helped her back onto the wagon, and they started the long ride back to the Broken Spur Ranch. "You all right?" he asked after an hour of complete silence. "I am not sure," Charlotte admitted. "It feels like this happened to someone else." "Just give it a minute. It will sink in." She finally looked at him. "Does this feel strange to you?" "I needed a wife. Now I have one." "Feels practical," he said, but there was a tiny catch in his voice, telling her he was not as calm as he let on. They rolled back up to the ranch around noon. The hands in the yard tipped their hats, some sincere, some just amused. Maria had fixed a real nice lunch, but they ate in that same heavy silence from the ride. That evening, Blackthorn led Charlotte to a new room. It was bigger than her last one, with a window that looked out on the desert, and it had a lock on the inside. "This is your room," he told her. "Mine is down at the other end of the hall. Maria sleeps downstairs. If you need anything, just holler." "Mr. Blackthorn." "It is Wade," he corrected. "We are married now." "Might as well use first names." "Wade." Charlotte said the name. It felt awkward on her tongue. "Thank you for keeping your word." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw something flicker in his gray eyes. Maybe it was loneliness, or maybe just pure exhaustion. "Get some rest, Charlotte. Tomorrow you will start learning how this ranch works." And then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Charlotte closed the door, turned the lock, and sat on the bed. She was a married woman, married to a man she barely knew in a place she did not understand, with no idea what the future held. But she was safe. She had a job, a roof over her head, and a contract that said she was protected. Charlotte laid back on the bed and shut her eyes. Tomorrow she would begin. She would learn to be Charlotte Blackthorn, wife to a rancher. Tomorrow, this strange new life would start. Tonight, she just had to live with the fact that she had gambled everything on a man with eyes like a storm cloud and a heart she could not read. The sun set over the Broken Spur Ranch, painting the sky red and gold. Charlotte fell asleep to the sound of coyotes singing, wondering what she had really gotten herself into. And she wondered if Wade, Blackthorn's word, was as solid as the Arizona rock, or as shifting as the desert sand. Charlotte woke in the dark to the sound of someone moving downstairs. For a confusing second, she forgot where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The ranch, the wedding, and Blackthorn, her husband in name only. He was somewhere in this strange house. She laid perfectly still, listening. She heard footsteps, and then the front door creaked open and closed. Through her window, she saw the first gray light of dawn. Someone was already starting their day, and Charlotte realized with a sudden jolt that she probably should be too. She dressed quickly in the faint light, picking the plainest of her three dresses, a brown one that had seen better days. But it would be fine for work. Her hands trembled just a little as she pinned up her hair. She paused and looked at herself in the small mirror. It was the same face as yesterday, but somehow everything was different. Married. She was a married woman now, even if she did spend her wedding night all alone. She had listened to the old house creak and settle around her like it was a sleeping giant. The kitchen was empty when she got there, but a fire was already burning in the stove. The smell of coffee filled the air. Charlotte poured herself a cup, glad for something to do with her hands. She was taking her first sip when Maria walked in. Maria came through the back door carrying a basket of fresh eggs. "Ah, you are awake. Good." The older woman set the basket down and started grabbing pans. "Wade left an hour ago. He and the men are moving cattle to the north pasture. They will not be back until tonight." Charlotte felt a strange mix of emotions. She was relieved, but also a little disappointed. "Should I have been up earlier to make breakfast?" Maria laughed, a warm sound that eased Charlotte's nerves. "Honey, the men eat before the sun is even up. Wade was gone before you opened your eyes. Besides, that is my job. Your job is to learn how this place works, so you can manage it proper." "Manage it?" Charlotte asked. "But I do not know anything about ranching." "Not the ranching," Maria said. "The house, the books, the business side of things." Maria cracked eggs into a bowl like she had done it a million times. "Wade is good with cattle and horses, but he is drowning in paperwork. Bills, contracts, letters. He hates all of it. That is where you come in." She paused, giving Charlotte a knowing look. "You can read and write?" "Yes." "And you can do numbers?" Yes, I handled my father's books for years. Well then, you'll do just fine. After breakfast, I'll show you where Wade keeps his papers. But I'm telling you, it's a real mess in there. And Maria was not kidding. After a good breakfast of eggs, beans, and fresh tortillas, Charlotte's own cooking back in Philadelphia seemed mighty sad by comparison. The older woman led her to a small room off the main hall that Wade called his office. Papers were piled on every single surface, from the desk to the chairs. They were even stacked high on the floor. Old ledgers were left wide open with writing that just stopped in the middle of a page. A crate that once held bullets was overflowing with unopened mail. Lord have mercy, Charlotte whispered. How does he find anything in here? He doesn't. That's the whole problem, Maria said, picking up a stack of papers. Bills from 6 months ago, a letter from the land office, something about a feed order. It's all just thrown together. Charlotte felt that old, familiar urge to make things right. She had felt the same way looking at her own father's messy study. A mess like this just felt plain wrong to her. Numbers and words needed to be in their proper place. Where does he keep the current ledger? Under all that, somewhere, Maria said, waving a hand at the desk. He writes things down when he gets around to it. But mostly he just keeps it all up in his head. That's just plain crazy. How does he track what he spends or what folks owe him? You will have to ask him that yourself. I just cook and clean. All them numbers just give me a headache. Charlotte rolled up her sleeves. Finally, as this was something she knew how to handle. This was something she could fix. I'm going to need a clear table. Can you help me move some of this? They worked all morning just sorting through the chaos. Charlotte made a few piles, urgent, important, for later, and trash. That trash pile got bigger and bigger with old receipts and outdated price lists. She even found advertisements for equipment Wade was never going to buy. Underneath it all, she found 3 ledgers, all in Wade's messy handwriting. The entries jumped from January to April, then all the way to November with no rhyme or reason. He just writes things down when he feels like it, Charlotte muttered. There is no system here. How has this ranch not gone under? Wade keeps most of it right up here, Maria said, tapping her forehead. He knows every cow, every broken fence, and every dollar he's ever spent. But getting it down on paper? Well, that is a whole other story. By noon, Charlotte had the desk all cleared off. She had made a system that actually made sense. Current bills in one pile, paid ones in another, and letters that needed answers in a third. She found a brand new ledger in a drawer and started putting Wade's scattered notes into a proper set of books, with columns for the date, what it was for, and the amount. And right away, those numbers started telling a story. The broken Spur was making money, but just barely. Wade was living hand to mouth, putting every last penny he made right back into the ranch for new tools, fence repairs, and feed for the dry season. There was nothing set aside for a rainy day. One bad year, one single disaster, and he would lose everything. And he was trying to claim a homestead on top of it all. Charlotte leaned back and rubbed her tired eyes. That man was either the bravest soul in Texas or a darn fool. Maybe a little bit of both. You look like you have seen a ghost, Maria said from the doorway, holding a plate of food. Eat something. You have been at this for hours. How long has Wade been running this place by himself? 3 years now. Ever since his daddy passed, Maria said, setting the plate down. They ran it together before that, but the old man had a bad stroke and left Wade with everything. The ranch, all the debts, and that dream of his for the homestead. What is so special about that homestead land? Maria got a faraway look in her eyes. Water, she said simply. There is a creek that runs through it all year long. It never dries up. With that water, Wade could grow his herd. He could even grow his own feed, maybe plant some crops. Without it, she just shrugged. He will get by, but he will never get ahead. Charlotte looked down at the numbers in the book. And this Harlan Crane fellow wants that same land. Crane wants it all. He's got the biggest ranch around here, but it is never enough for him. He sees that water and he sees a way to take over more land and push out smaller ranchers. Maria's voice got hard as a rock. He has been after the broken Spur for years. He made Wade's daddy a dozen offers, each one lower than the one before. And when the old man told him no, that is when strange things started happening. fences getting cut. They'd find cattle scattered, and once, a fire nearly burned the whole barn down. Folks asked if they called the law. Sheriff Dalton sure tried to help, but there was never a lick of proof. Crane is too clever to do the dirty work himself. He pays other men for that. Maria started to leave, but then she stopped. And that, my dear, is why Wade needed a wife in such a hurry. You see, Crane already put in a claim for that homestead. If Wade does not file his own claim as a married man, Crane's lawyers will tangle it all up in court. The fight would go on until the man with the most money wins. And that sure is not Wade. After Maria walked out, Charlotte just sat there in the quiet office. She stared at the neat stacks of paper she had made. She had agreed to this deal. For her own survival, really, for her own, and a roof over her head. But now she was starting to see that Wade had not just hired himself a wife for legal reasons. He had bet everything he had on a complete stranger. He was counting on her to help him save not just his land, but his whole future. The weight of it all felt heavy on her shoulders. Later that evening, Charlotte was copying the last messy notes into the new ledger book. That is when she heard the sound of horses out in the yard. She heard low, tired voices. It was the sound of men who had spent a long day under a brutal Texas sun. She fought the urge to peek out the window. Instead, she kept her eyes glued to the numbers on the page. About 15 minutes later, Wade stood in the office doorway. He looked worn clean out, covered head to toe in dust. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. A dark streak of mud, or maybe even blood, was smeared across his jaw. But his gray eyes were sharp as they took in the completely changed room. He just asked, "What in the world did you do in here?" Charlotte put her pen down. "I organize things. Everything is sorted by what it is and by the date. The bills that need paying are in the red tray. Letters that need an answer are in the blue one. I also started a brand new ledger with proper columns. I moved all your notes from the last year into it. You had notes written on little scraps of paper and the backs of old envelopes. I put everything together in one spot." Wade walked further into the room. He picked up the new ledger and started flipping through the pages. His eyebrows went up just a little bit. "This is mighty detailed," he said. "Well, that is how bookkeeping is supposed to work. You have to track every penny or you will never know where you truly stand." Charlotte paused for a second. "I hope I did not step on any toes. You did say my job was to help with the books." "No," he said. "This is—" He set the ledger down on the desk, real gentle, almost like it was fragile. "This is good. It is better than good. I can actually read what it says." "Your handwriting is not so bad," Charlotte offered, trying to be polite. The corner of his mouth twitched up. It was that almost smile again. "You mean on the rare occasion I bother to write it down?" he asked. "Maria told me you keep most of it in your head." "It worked well enough for my father. He never wrote much down either." "With all due respect, sir, that is a terrible system. What would happen if something happened to town? No one would know who the ranch owes money to, or who owes money to the ranch. The whole place would fall to pieces." Charlotte stopped herself. "I am sorry, that was forward of me." "No," he said. "It was honest." Wade pulled off his dusty gloves, looking at her with that thoughtful expression. "You are not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" she asked. "Someone a little more delicate, I reckon. Someone who might crumble under a little bit of hard work." He motioned toward the tidy office. "This must have taken you all day, did it not?" "Most of it, yes, but I enjoyed the work. Numbers just make sense to me. They always follow the rules, unlike people." Charlotte looked him right in the eye. "Unlike people," she agreed. In that quiet moment, something passed between them. It was not exactly warmth, but it was a kind of understanding. They were both the kind of people who liked order more than chaos. They preferred logic over feelings, and solid contracts over empty promises. In a strange way, they got each other. "I'm going to go wash up," Wade finally said. "We eat supper at 6. After we eat, I will show you the letters that need answers. Some of them have to do with the homestead claim." "All right," she said. He started to walk away, but then he turned back. "Charlotte, thank you for all this." He made a small motion with his hand, pointing to the organized office. "It helps a lot." And then he was gone, the sound of his boots echoing on the wood floors. Charlotte sat there by herself in the neat office and felt a little something change inside her. It was not attraction, she barely even knew the man. But it was something, maybe it was respect. Or maybe it was the start of a real partnership. She had married him just to survive. But maybe, just maybe, she could be the one to help him make his impossible dream come true. Supper that night was a livelier affair than Charlotte had expected. Wade's ranch hands, Tommy, Miguel, and three other fellas, whose names she could not quite recall, all ate at a long table in the kitchen. They were busy trading stories and telling jokes. All the while, Maria made sure everyone's plate stayed full. Charlotte sat right next to Wade, feeling a bit awkward and out of her element, but it seemed nobody expected her to say much anyway. The fellas were curious, asking polite questions about her journey, but they accepted her vague answers without pushing. "Boss says you are a real whiz with numbers," Tommy said around a mouthful of beef, made his office look halfway civilized. "I just put things in order," Charlotte said quietly. "Yeah, but he has been promising to do that for 2 years." Miguel grinned. "We figured he would be 6 feet under before it ever happened." Wade shot him a hard look. "I have been busy keeping this ranch from going under. Some of us do not have time to make the bills look pretty." "No, you just lose them under other bills," a fella named Jake said with a laugh. "Remember when you paid Mr. Wilson twice because you could not find the first receipt?" "That was one time, twice," Miguel corrected him. "You did the same thing with the feed store." Charlotte hid her smile behind a coffee cup as Wade's jaw clenched. He did not like being teased, but he took it from his men, knowing some fights were not worth the trouble. After supper, the men headed to the bunkhouse, and Charlotte helped Maria with the dishes. Then Wade led her back to the office, lit by the flickering glow of oil lamps. He pulled out a folder. "This is from the land office. They want proof of our situation. Proof of marriage, proof we are building a home on the claim. They want to see we are for real, not just filing papers to cheat the system." Charlotte read through the letters. The official language was thick, but the message was clear. The land office had other claims for that same piece of land, and they were going to investigate every last one. They were sending an inspector in the next few months. "An inspector," Charlotte repeated softly, "to make sure we are really married, and that we are living like a married couple trying to make a home. They will want to see us on the property, see we have built a cabin, see cleared land, or crops or livestock." Wade leaned on the desk. "I have been working on a cabin up there for the last month. The basic frame is up, but it is not finished. I planned to move us up there after the claim was approved, but now—" His voice trailed off. "Now we might have to move there before it is approved," Charlotte finished. "To prove we are serious." "Exactly." She set the letters down. "How long would we have to stay?" "Depends on when that inspector shows up. Could be a month, could be 3. "And the ranch? Who will run it?" "Miguel can handle things. He has been here long enough. He knows how it all works. I would ride down every few days to check in." Wade looked at her hard. "I know this is not what we agreed on. If you are not okay with it—" "A cabin in the wild is still a whole lot better than the streets of Philadelphia," Charlotte said. "But I will need time to get the accounts straight before we go. And we will need to keep up with the mail. I cannot let bills go unpaid just because we are living up on a hill somewhere." Wade's expression changed to one of surprise, and maybe respect. "You are taking this seriously. You married me to help secure this land. I plan to hold up my end of the deal." Charlotte met his gaze. "Besides, if we are going to fool an inspector that we are a real family, we had better be convincing. That means knowing each other better than we do now." "Knowing each other," Wade repeated the word slowly. "The basic things, where I am from, where you are from, how we supposedly met, our habits, our interests. If an inspector asks us and our answers do not match, he will know it is all a lie." Wade was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat. He motioned for her to do the same. "All right, what do you need to know?" Charlotte took out a clean sheet of paper and her pen. "Everything. Start with your family. You said your father ran this ranch. He ran it until he died 3 years ago. A stroke took him fast. He was gone in a day." Wade's voice was flat, but Charlotte could hear the pain underneath. "My mother died when I was 12. A fever. After that, it was just me and my pa, building this place from nothing. I had a little sister, Sarah. She passed on the same year as my ma from the same fever. Charlotte's pen stopped. Oh, Wade, I am so sorry. He just shrugged, but his shoulders were tight. It was a long time ago, he said. Time does not make the hurt go away, Charlotte said softly. My own mother passed 5 years back. I still find myself wanting to tell her things. Their eyes met, and for a second the walls between them just crumbled away. Two souls who had lost too much, too soon. Finding a little bit of understanding in a quiet, lamplit office. Wade cleared his throat. All right, what else do you need to know? So for the next hour they talked. Charlotte learned he was 31 years old and had never been married. She also found out he had spent 6 whole months up in Montana. He was there learning about cattle from an old friend of his father's. He could not play the harmonica to save his life, hated beans, and had a scar on his shoulder. He got it from a horse that threw him into a fence post when he was just 16. In return, she told him all about Philadelphia and her father's business. She even told him about the scandal that had cost her family everything. She left out Richard Peaton's name, though. That memory still stung way too much. She talked about her mother's beautiful garden and how she loved books, and how she could not carry a tune in a bucket. You cannot sing a lick? Wade asked, with a hint of a smile in his voice. I sound like a cat caught in a screen door, she admitted. My mother used to beg me to just mouth the words in church, and that right there earned her a real smile from him. It was small, but it was genuine. It changed his whole face, softening all those hard lines and making him look younger. Charlotte's breath caught, and she had to look away. She was all flustered by her own reaction. We need a story, she said, trying to focus on the paper again. Something believable about how we met. Wade thought for a moment. You came here looking for a job. I hired you. We spent some time together, found we got along, and decided to get married. It is the truth, mostly, he said, except for the falling in love part. Do we need that? Charlotte tapped her pen. Well, most folks do marry for love. If we say it was just a business deal, people might get suspicious. So we lie, he stated. We add to the story, she corrected. We can say we enjoyed each other's company, that we discovered we were a good match, which is not a total lie. Wade's gray eyes locked right on hers. We have been married for 1 day, Charlotte. How can you possibly know if we are a good match? Because I know you are a man of your word, she said, and I know you are working yourself to the bone to save this ranch. I also know you could have taken advantage of me, but you did not. She put her pen down. That is enough for me to believe we just might suit each other, given time. He was quiet for a long moment, and she started to worry she had said too much. Then he spoke. I know you are a whole lot braver than you think, and I know you are smart enough to make sense of my mess in just 1 day, and you are honest, even when it is hard. He stood up and walked toward the door, and that is enough for me too. After he left, Charlotte just sat there looking at their notes. On paper, it almost looked like they were a real couple, two people with their own pasts who somehow found each other. But paper is one thing. Living it was going to be the hard part. The next few days, they settled into a routine. Charlotte was up before the sun, helping Maria with breakfast for the ranch hands. Then she would spend her mornings wrestling with the ranch's account books. And what those books showed her was a grim picture. Wade was deep in debt, not drowning, but close enough that one bad season could sink the whole place. He owed money to the feed store, the equipment man, and the bank down in Phoenix. The mortgage was paid, but just barely. How in the world does he do it? Charlotte asked Maria one afternoon. There is just no room for error. He goes without, Maria said simply. Look at him. When was the last time you saw that man in a new shirt? Or new boots? He wears his things until they are nothing but rags. Maria kept kneading her dough, her hands moving with a steady, practiced rhythm. Food for the men, their wages, his equipment. Every single penny goes right back into this ranch. He has not taken a single day off in 3 years. Charlotte thought about the quiet man she barely saw. He worked from sunup to sundown, dragging himself home covered in dust and bone-tired. He would eat his dinner fast, say very little, and then head to his room. Sometimes late at night she could hear him up, pacing the floor. She'd hear his boots pacing overhead and wondered if that man ever slept. About a week after they married, Charlotte was in the office. That's when she heard shouting in the yard. She looked up from her books to see a group of men riding toward the house. Wade and his ranch hands stopped their work and walked to meet them. Charlotte could see the tension in Wade's shoulders from a mile away. She moved to the window to get a better look. The man in the lead was older, maybe 50, dressed way too fancy for ranch work. He rode a stunning Palomino horse with silver sparkling on its saddle. The three men with him looked less like cowboys and more like hired guns. You could see their rifles right there in their saddle holsters. "That's Crane," Maria said softly right beside her. "Far Crane." Charlotte watched Wade stop a good 10 feet from the riders, his hands hanging loose and ready. She could see he was in complete control. Miguel and Tommy stood on either side of him, just as tense. "I should go out there," Charlotte said. "No, you let Wade handle it." "But I'm his wife now. Isn't that the whole reason for this?" Maria gave her a sharp look. "The reason was to file papers, not to get yourself in front of Far Crane. That man is dangerous. You stay inside." But Charlotte was already headed for the door. She had spent 25 years being a proper lady, staying inside while the men handled things. That part of her life was over. If she was Wade Blackthorn's wife, even just on paper, she was going to act like it. She stepped onto the porch right as Crane started talking. "Just being neighborly, Wade. Heard you went and got yourself a wife. Came to offer my congratulations." The older man's voice was smooth as silk, but it was dripping with mockery. "I appreciate that," Wade said, his voice flat. "Now you can turn around and let me get back to my work." "Well now, is that any way to treat a neighbor? Especially one with a business proposition for you?" "Not interested in anything you're selling, Crane." Crane's eyes slid past Wade and landed right on Charlotte. His smile got wider. "Is this the new bride? My, she is a pretty thing. Where'd you find her, Wade? Mail order?" Charlotte saw Wade's hands ball into fists. She started walking before he could say a word, coming down the steps with her head held high. She used the same walk her mother taught her, the one that said she belonged in high society, and you did not. It was the walk that had always worked back east. "Mrs. Blackthorn," she said, holding her hand out to Crane like they were at a fancy party. "How kind of you to welcome me." Crane leaned down from his horse to take her hand, his smile turning greedy. "The pleasure is all mine, ma'am. Harlan Crane. I own the Triple C, the biggest spread in 3 counties." "How very impressive," Charlotte said politely, but with no warmth at all. "Although size is not everything, is it? I have found that well-managed ranches of any size can be quite successful." The smile on Crane's face froze solid. Beside her, Charlotte heard Tommy choke back a laugh. Quite right," Crane said after a second. "And how are you finding ranch life, Mrs. Blackthorn? Must be a big change for you." "I'm from Philadelphia. And yes, it is different, but the change is refreshing. There is an honesty out here in the West that I truly appreciate." She let her words hang in the air. Crane's eyes narrowed just a little. "Honesty, yes. Well, speaking of that, I was just about to make your husband an offer on that northern piece of land. The old homestead. I figured I could save him all that paperwork. Even share some of the water rights. Make it worth his while." "How generous," Charlotte said. "But I'm afraid that land is very important to our plans. We are looking forward to building our future there." "Your future?" Crane looked from her to Wade and back again. "Funny timing, you two getting married right when that land became available." "I would call good fortune, not funny," Charlotte replied coolly. "But I suppose a suspicious person might see a plot in every happy coincidence." The air suddenly felt heavy and thick. One of Crane's men shifted in his saddle, his hand inching toward his rifle. Wade moved closer to Charlotte, a silent promise to protect her. "We have work to do, Crane," Wade said, his voice low. "It is time for you to leave. I am making a fair offer, and I am giving you a fair answer." "No, now get off my land." Crane's polite act started to crumble. "You are making a mistake, Blackthorn. That homestead ought to be mine, and you know it. Your father knew it too. That is why he could never make the claim stick. My father is dead. I am not." "Not yet," Crane said softly, "but this territory is dangerous. Accidents can happen, especially to folks who get too ambitious." His eyes flicked over to Charlotte. to people with things they could lose. Wade's hand shot out and snatched Crane's reins, yanking the horse's head down hard. That sounded like a threat. Did you want to be clear about that? Just stating the facts. A man with a brand new wife to look after might want to be more careful about his plans. Crane wrenched his horse's head free. You think about it, Wade. My offer is good for 1 more week. After that, you will wish you had taken it. He spun his horse around, his men followed, and they galloped out of the yard in a storm of dust. Charlotte stood there frozen, her heart hammering in her chest as Wade watched them ride away. That was a foolish thing to do, he finally said, without even looking at her. Excuse me? Coming out here, talking to him? That was foolish and dangerous. Charlotte's temper flared. I am your wife. Was I supposed to hide inside like a scared little girl? You are a convenience, not a real wife. And Crane just got a good long look at you, which means now he knows exactly how to hurt me. Wade finally turned to her, his eyes as cold as a winter morning. Next time I tell you to stay inside, you stay inside. He stormed off toward the barn, leaving Charlotte in the yard, shaking with anger and, she had to admit, with fear. Crane's threat had been crystal clear, and she had just made herself easy to see. She had just painted a target on her own back. That night, Charlotte lay awake, listening to the sound of Wade's boots pacing on the floor above her, back and forth, until the first light of dawn started to paint the sky. The silence between them at breakfast was thick and heavy, like the air right before a big storm. Wade sat at the other end of the table, eating Maria's biscuits and gravy, and making a point of not looking at Charlotte. She gave him the same silent treatment, her pride keeping her back straight and her eyes on her own plate, even as anger bubbled up inside her. Tommy and Miguel shot each other a look, but knew better than to say a word. Even Maria was quiet, just refilling coffee cups without any of her usual cheerful chatter. It was Jake who finally broke the silence, clearing his throat. Boss, do you want us to start on the north fence line today, or work on the cabin? The cabin, Wade cut in, his voice rough. We are moving everything up. I want that homestead cabin finished in 2 weeks. Miguel's eyebrows shot up. 2 weeks, boss? You heard me? 2 weeks. I do not care what it takes. We will work through the weekend if we have to. Wade finally looked up, his gray eyes like stone. Crane made his move yesterday. He knows about the marriage now, so he will be looking for ways to fight it. We need to be living on that land before the inspector shows up, and it needs to look like we have been there for a while. Living up there? Tommy asked. You and Mrs. Blackthorne? That is usually how homesteading works, yes. Charlotte put her fork down very carefully. May I have a say in decisions that affect where I am going to live? Wade's jaw clenched. We talked about this. We talked about it as something that might happen someday, not something happening in 2 weeks. Things changed yesterday. Crane made threats that you seem to believe are my fault. Charlotte's voice was quiet but sharp. Perhaps if we are going to talk about what happened yesterday, we should do it in private instead of in front of all your men. The whole room went dead silent. Charlotte could feel 5 sets of eyes bouncing between her and Wade, waiting to see who would give in first. Wade just stared at her for a long moment, and something changed in his eyes. Maybe it was surprise, or maybe it was a little bit of respect. Fine. He pushed his chair back and stood up. My office, now. Charlotte stood with more grace than she felt and followed him out of the kitchen, hearing the whispers start up as soon as the door swung shut. Wade held the office door for her with a stiff sort of politeness, then closed it firmly behind them. You wanted to talk about yesterday, he said before she could even get a word out. We need to talk. You went right against my orders. I am not some ranch hand you can boss around. You are under my watch here. That means you listen to me when there is trouble. I was just trying to help. We are supposed to look like a real married couple, you know, and a real wife does not hide inside while her husband is being threatened. Charlotte could feel her anger rising no matter how hard she tried to stay calm. I have spent my whole life being told to stay put, be quiet, and let the men handle it. Well, my father handled things right into a scandal and an early grave. And Richard Peaton handled things by leaving me the second I was no longer useful. So forgive me if I have a hard time trusting a man's judgment. Wade's face softened a bit. A little of that anger just seemed to drain away. He asked, "Who is Richard Peaton?" Charlotte felt her breath catch. She did not mean to say his name. "He is nobody. It does not matter." "It sounds like it matters a whole lot. Who is he?" "He was my fiancé." The words left a bad taste in her mouth. We were set to be married for 2 years. But the day my father died and the scandal hit, Richard had his mother's maid return my letters and call off the wedding. He could not even do it himself. Wade stood there quietly for a second, then he said, "Sounds like a coward to me." No, he was being practical. I had become a problem. There is a big difference between practical and cowardly. A practical man would have helped you pick up the peas, would have stood by your side. What he did was just plain yellow-bellied. Wade just shook his head. Charlotte felt a weight lift from her chest. She half expected him to make excuses for Richard, for one man to defend another. But instead, Wade called it exactly what it was. "Thank you," she said, her voice low. "But that does not change what happened out there. I was trying to show we are a team, and you made yourself a bullseye." Wade walked over to the desk and leaned on it. "Crane is a smart man, Charlotte. He does not make idle threats. He saw you out there. He saw that I care about—" He stopped and corrected himself. "That I am responsible for you. Now he knows the quickest way to get to me is through you. You think I do not know that? I watch the high society folks in Philadelphia ruin people for sport. I know exactly how threats work." Charlotte crossed her arms. "But I also know that if you show weakness, you are just asking for more trouble. If I had stayed inside, Crane would know he could scare us. Instead, what he saw was a united front. No, what he saw was a woman who would be easy to grab." The cold truth of his words sent a shiver down her spine. "Is that a real danger?" Wade looked her straight in the eye. His honesty was almost worse than his anger. "I do not know. Crane has pulled a lot of stunts over the years. He has done sabotage, made threats, used the law to his advantage. But to actually hurt someone, to take them, I do not think he would. But I cannot be sure, Crane." Charlotte just sank into a chair, feeling suddenly worn out. "Loyabais, what is our next move?" "We move, and we move fast. Get to the homestead, make it clear we live there. That will make it harder for him to fight our claim. And you," he paused, his voice getting a little softer, "you stay close to me. No more riding to town by yourself. And no more walking out to meet dangerous men in the yard. I will not live my life in a cage, Wade. I am not asking you to. I am asking you to be smart." He pulled up the other chair and sat. Some of the tension left his shoulders. "Look, I know this is a whole lot more than you bargained for. The deal was for a job, and now I am telling you there is a man who might try to harm you just to spite me. If you want to walk away, I would understand. I can get you a ticket to California, give you enough cash to start over somewhere. Crane will never find you." Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him, and saw he meant every word. He would give up his land, his father's whole dream, just to keep her out of harm's way. She realized it was maybe the kindest thing anyone had offered her in a very long time. "No," she said simply. Wade blinked, surprised. "No, I made a deal to help you get this land. I do not back out of a deal just because things get a little tough." She sat up straighter. "Besides, you are not the only one with something on the line here. Everyone back home in Philadelphia decided I was a ruined woman, just a scandal to be whispered about. I would surely like to prove them all wrong by building something that matters." A real smile finally appeared on Wade's face, not just a little twitch. "Well, you are either the bravest woman I have ever met or the most stubborn. Can I not be both?" "I suppose you can." He stood up and held out his hand. "Partners then?" "Real partners, not just on paper." Charlotte took his hand, feeling its rough strength. "Partners?" she asked. "That means you have to talk to me before making big decisions for both of us." He nodded. "Fair enough. And you have to ask before you walk right into danger." "I'll think about it," Charlotte said with a small smile. That made Wade's own smile grow a bit. "I'll take what I can get." And just like that, the next 2 weeks became a whirlwind of activity. Wade and the men worked on the cabin from sunup to sundown. Charlotte handled the ranch books and got ready for the move. While Maria helped her list everything they would need, they listed bedding, pots and pans, tools, and food. Together, they packed it all into big crates. "You are going to need warmer clothes," Maria said, looking at Charlotte's small wardrobe. "It gets mighty cold up there at night, even in summer." Charlotte looked at her 3 dresses, already worn nearly threadbare, and tried not to worry. "I do not have money for new clothes." "Oh, you do not need new. I have some things from when I was younger, before I filled out so much." Maria went into her room and came back with an armful of sturdy cotton dresses, a warm shawl, and a good pair of boots. "These will serve you better than those fancy city shoes." "Maria, I cannot possibly take these." "You are not taking, I am giving. What on earth would I do with them? They are just sitting in a trunk getting eaten by moths." The older woman gently pressed them into Charlotte's arms. "Besides, you are family now. This is what family does." That one word, family, hit Charlotte right in the heart. She had lost her own family, her real family, and never dreamed she would find another one here. But Maria's kindness and the way the ranch hands had started teasing her like one of their own, even Wade's gruff way of protecting her, it was all starting to feel like home. On the 3rd day, Wade took her up to see the cabin. They rode together, Charlotte on Sweet Buttercup and Wade on his big sorrel horse. They followed a little trail that wound up into the hills. The higher they climbed, the more the land changed. The dry brush turned into pine trees. The air felt cooler and smelled sweet. Charlotte could hear running water nearby. "That is North Creek," Wade said, nodding toward the sound. "It runs all year long. Never freezes solid, not even in the dead of winter. That water is what makes this land worth fighting for." They came out into a clearing, and the sight made Charlotte gasp. The cabin stood at the edge of a beautiful meadow, backed by tall pine trees with the creek flowing right past it. It was a simple log building, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, but it looked solid as a rock. A stone chimney stood at one end, and the roof had brand new shingles. It had windows on 3 sides, with real glass that must have cost a fortune. "Wade, it is beautiful," Charlotte said, and she meant every word. He swung down from his horse and helped her down, a gentlemanly habit he had picked up lately. Inside, it was one big room with a sleeping loft up in the rafters. A cast-iron stove sat in one corner, and a simple table and chairs in another. The floor was just packed earth for now, but Wade pointed to a stack of lumber. "I am planning to put in a real wood floor next month, and I will build us a proper bed frame. It is pretty basic for now." But Charlotte walked to the window, looking out at the wildflowers dancing in the meadow. "It is more than basic, Wade," she said softly. "It is a home." "It will be," Basidi answered, coming to stand beside her, his voice quieter than usual. "My daddy used to bring me up here when I was just a boy. That was before Crane's family owned all the land around us, before all the trouble over the water started. He would point right to this spot and say, 'Someday, son, someday this will all be ours.' He would be so proud of you," Charlotte told him, "for fighting so hard." Wade was quiet for a good long while. "I sure hope so," he finally said, "though he would probably tell me I am doing it the hard way. Is there an easy way?" Probably not, but he would say it anyway. They stood there together in the quiet of the cabin, and Charlotte felt a real change between them. The wall around Wade Blackthorne did not come tumbling down, but maybe a little crack had formed, letting her see the real man inside. "We ought to head back," Wade said. "We still have work to do before sunset." But as they rode back down the trail, Charlotte could not help but look back at their new home. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt a little bit of hope. The day before they were fiend to move, Wade rode into Phoenix. He came back with supplies and a big surprise, a small Derringer pistol and a box of bullets. "You need to learn to shoot," he said, getting straight to the point. He set them right on the kitchen table. Charlotte just stared at the gun. "I know, that's the problem." Wade picked up the little pistol. He checked the empty chamber like an expert. "This is small enough to hide in a pocket. 2 shots, and it's easy to handle. I want you to have it on you whenever I am not around." "You really think it will come to that?" she asked. "I think you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. Come on. We have about an hour of daylight left." He led her out past the barn to a clear spot where he'd set up some old bottles on fence posts. For the next hour, he taught her everything: how to load it, how to aim, and how to handle the kick. Charlotte's first 3 shots missed completely, which made Tommy and Miguel laugh over by the barn. But her 4th shot shattered a bottle clean in 2, and her 5th shot did the very same thing. "You're a naturals," Wade said, and he sounded almost proud. "Or I just have beginner's luck. My father took me shooting one time when I was 12. Charlotte admitted, reloading the gun carefully. "Just that once, before my mother found out and put a stop to it. But I remember I liked it, the way it made me focus." Well, that focus might just save your life someday. Keep practicing. They spent the rest of the evening breaking bottles until Charlotte's hands hurt and her ears were ringing. But by the time it got dark, she was hitting the targets more often than not. The weight of that little gun in her pocket started to feel a bit more normal. That night, she found Wade on the porch, just looking out into the dark desert. She had been on her way to bed, but something made her stop. She stepped outside to join him. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." He did not look at her, his face sharp in the moonlight. "About tomorrow, about all the ways this could go wrong." Charlotte leaned against the porch railing. "Having second thoughts?" "I always have second thoughts," and he said. "That is what keeps you alive." Wade glanced at her. "Are you terrified, Charlotte?" she admitted. "But that seems to be how I feel all the time lately. I figure I might as well be terrified while doing something useful." That made him laugh a little. "That's one heck of a life philosophy." "It has gotten me this far," she said. They stood there in a comfortable silence. They listened to the sounds of the night. Coyotes yipping in the distance, an owl calling out, and the soft sounds of the horse in the corral. Charlotte found herself studying Wade's face, wondering what he was really thinking behind those careful gray eyes. He was still a mystery to her, this man she had married. She knew the basic facts about him. She knew he worked hard and always kept his word, but the real man underneath it all was still locked away. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Depends on the question." "The fire that Maria mentioned," she started, "the one that almost destroyed your father's first homestead. What really happened?" Wade's jaw got tight. "Why does that matter?" "Because Crane mentioned it too. He said your father could never make the claim stick." "I need to know what we are really up against." For a long moment, Charlotte thought he would not answer. Then Wade sighed, a sound full of old sadness and even older anger. "I was 8 years old. My pa had just started building on that same piece of land, right where our cabin is now. He had gotten the first approval. He was just waiting for the final claim to be processed. We were living in a tent while he built." Wade's voice sounded far away, like he was remembering it all. "One night, a fire broke out. It spread fast, much faster than a natural fire ever should have. My pa got me, my ma, and Sarah out, but everything else burned. The tent, the supplies, the lumber for the house, everything. And your father thought it was on purpose?" "He knew it was on purpose. He found what started it the next morning. But there was no proof and no one saw anything. Crane's father, Harlan's old man, he had the local lawman in his pocket. The investigation went absolutely nowhere." Wade's hands gripped the railing hard. "My pa tried to rebuild, but the claim got all tangled up in paperwork. The rules kept changing. The deadlines got moved. Every time he met one of their conditions, they would just add another one. Finally, he had to abandon it or lose the whole ranch trying to fight it. And now you are trying again." "Now I am trying again. And Crane is using the same playbook his father did. Legal challenges, delays. And if that does not work," Wade's voice turned hard as stone, "he will escalate. That's why we got to be up there, where everyone can see us, all settled in. Makes it harder for him to pull his old stunts." Charlotte let that sink in. She finally understood the heavy burden Wade was carrying. This was more than just land or water. It was about finishing what his father started, about getting justice that was over 20 years late. "I won't let him run you off again," she said softly. Wade looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "This ain't your fight. I'm your wife, Wade. Even if it is just on paper, that makes it my fight too." Charlotte held his gaze. "Besides, I am getting real tired of men like Crane thinking they can take whatever they want just because they have money. Maybe it is high time someone stood up to him." Something in Wade's face changed then, the walls around him cracking just a little. You are a stubborn one, aren't you? Told you I was. Yeah, you did. He turned away, but Charlotte could have sworn she saw the hint of a smile. Get some rest, Charlotte. Tomorrow we start building something worth fighting for. Charlotte went to bed that night feeling the weight of the little pistol under her pillow and Wade's words in her head. Something worth fighting for. She came out here just trying to survive. But maybe, just maybe, she had found something more. The move to the homestead took 2 whole days. They packed the wagon with supplies, furniture, and everything Charlotte figured they would need for at least 3 months out there alone. Maria packed enough food to feed a small army, worrying if they had enough coffee, enough flour, and enough jerky. We can always ride back for more, Wade told her for the third time. You will be busy. Charlotte can't do it all by herself. It is better to be prepared. Maria put another jar of preserves in the crate. And you take good care of her, Wade Blackthorne. She is a good woman, even if you married her for all the wrong reasons. Yes, ma'am, Wade said, all quiet-like, which made Charlotte hide a smile. They left the broken Spur with Miguel, who knew what he was doing. Tommy was set to ride up once a week with news and to see if they needed anything. The trip to the homestead was slow, the wagon was heavy, and the trail was rough. But Charlotte did not mind one bit. She rode Buttercup right beside the wagon, watching the land change as they went up, feeling like she was leaving one life behind for a new one. They finally pulled up to the cabin late that afternoon. Wade started unloading the wagon quick and sure, while Charlotte took a good look around her new home. Wade insisted she take the sleeping loft. He said it had more privacy and would be warmer in the winter. He would sleep on a bedroll downstairs until he could build a wall. We need to look married, not actually be married, he had said firmly, and Charlotte was grateful he made that clear. They worked clear past sundown, putting furniture in place and unpacking by lamplight. Maria had sent some curtains, and Charlotte hung them up, making the rough cabin feel more like a home. A rag rug went down by the stove. The dishes went on shelves Wade had built right into the walls. Her few books found a spot on a little table next to the loft ladder. It is coming together, Wade said, looking around, seeming pleased. Another week or two, and this place will look like we have been here a while. Charlotte came down the ladder after making her bed with Maria's quilts. So what is our story if the inspector shows up? How long are we supposed to have lived here? We will say we have been coming up on weekends for the past month, finishing up the building, and now we are moving in for good. Wade poured some coffee from the pot on the stove. It is mostly the truth. I have been up here on weekends. What about visitors? You think folks will stop by? Probably. Neighbors will want to meet the new wife. See if we are serious about this claim. He handed her a cup. You will have to be convincing. Act natural, like we have been married for a while. You think you can handle that? Charlotte took a sip of her coffee, thinking about what that meant. Little touches, smiles, all the small things married folks do. It meant pretending to care for a man she hardly knew, with everyone watching for a lie. I can handle it, she said, sounding a whole lot braver than she felt. Their first test came just 3 days later. Charlotte was hanging laundry on a line Wade had tied between 2 trees when she heard horses coming. Wade was out clearing brush for a garden spot, but he dropped his axe in a heartbeat and moved to his rifle, leaning against the cabin wall. You expecting company? Charlotte asked, her voice low. Nope. Wade's hand was on the rifle, but he didn't pick it up. Just stay close. 2 riders came out of the woods, a man and a woman, both getting on in years, riding sturdy horses. They had that sun-weathered look, and the woman was smiling wide. Howdy, the cabin, the man called out. We're the Hendersons, from the place just east of here. Heard you folks were moving in. Wade eased up, but just a little. Wade Blackthorne, and this is my wife, Charlotte. Charlotte wiped her hands on her apron and stepped up with a smile. Well, it's just lovely to have neighbors. Would you all like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot, Mrs. Henderson. Please, call me Ruth, she said, hopping off her horse like she'd done it 1,000 times. That would be a blessing, dear. It's a fair ride over here. For the next hour, Charlotte was the perfect hostess, pouring coffee and serving the biscuits Maria had sent. All the while, the Hendersons asked friendly questions, but Charlotte could feel their eyes on them, sizing them up, looking for cracks in their story. Were they a real married couple, or just playing house to get the land? So how did you two meet? Ruth asked, her eyes sharp even with that friendly smile. Charlotte glanced at Wade, who was standing near her chair, looking as comfortable as any husband would. I was looking for work at the Broken Spur. Wade offered me a position, she said, letting her smile turn a little shy. We just sort of found we suited each other. A mighty quick courtship, Mr. Henderson noted. Well, when you know, Wade said and laid his hand on Charlotte's shoulder. The touch was quick, not too personal, but it sold the story. No sense in waiting when you find the right one. Charlotte reached up and patted his hand, a gesture that felt strange but looked right. She saw Ruth's whole expression soften. The older woman was a romantic, Charlotte realized. She wanted to believe in love at first sight and whirlwind courtships that ended in happiness. Well, you two picked a beautiful spot, Ruth said, looking all around the cabin. That creek is a blessing. It never runs dry. You know, old Crane has been trying to get his hands on this water for years. So we've heard, Charlotte said carefully. Don't you let him scare you. That one's all talk. His daddy was the real danger. Mina's a rattler. Harlan is just plain greedy. Ruth put her cup down. But you watch your backs all the same. Greedy men do foolish things when they want something bad enough. The Hendersons left with promises to come back and invitations for supper once they were more settled. Charlotte waved until they were gone from sight. Then she let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was plain exhausting, she said. You did just fine, Wade said, already heading back to his clearing work. You think I was convincing? Charlotte looked at her shoulder where his hand had been, almost feeling it still. It had felt so awkward, but it looked real. That's all that matters. As Charlotte went back to her laundry, she wondered if the awkwardness was from the lie or from the troubling thought that Wade's touch wasn't entirely bad. That was a dangerous path to go down, catching feelings for a man who only married her for practical reasons. She'd already had her heart broken by Richard Peaton's cold logic. She wasn't about to repeat that mistake with Wade Blackthorne. The days soon fell into a steady rhythm. Wade worked the property, clearing brush, strengthening the cabin, and building a proper coop for the chickens Maria sent. Charlotte ran the household, her cooking getting better each day, and spent her nights writing in the ranch ledgers by lamplight. They were polite, careful with each other, keeping the lines of their agreement clear even as they got used to sharing the same space. But the world outside had a way of creeping in. Tommy rode up on the 6th day with mail and supplies. He handed Wade a letter that turned his face to stone. Charlotte was hanging herbs to dry but stopped, watching Wade's expression as he read. What is it? The land office. They're sending an inspector out next week. Charlotte's stomach sank. That's a lot sooner than we figured. It was coming a lot sooner than they thought. Someone was pushing for a quick review. Wade balled up the letter. I'd bet my last dollar it's Crane. He wants us out before we can set down real roots. Are we ready? Wade looked around their little cabin at all the hard work they'd put in, at the new life they were trying to build. Well, ready or not, we're going to have to be. The inspector would be there in 5 days. That was not nearly enough time to make this place look like a real lived-in home. So they spent those 5 days working from sunup to sundown. Wade built a sturdy table and 2 proper chairs. Charlotte hung more curtains, arranged their few belongings to look just right, and even put a jar of wildflowers on the windowsill. They were staging the perfect picture of a marriage. His dusty work clothes hung right beside her dresses. Their small collection of books sat together on the same shelf. 2 coffee cups were always waiting by the stove. On the 4th night, Charlotte was mending one of Wade's shirts when he came in from washing up for the night. His hair was wet and combed back. Without the usual layer of trail dust, he looked younger and somehow a little more vulnerable. He stopped when he saw her with the needle and thread. You don't have to do that. Well, the inspector might notice if your shirts are full of holes. Besides, she said, I need the practice. I am just terrible at sewing. She held up the shirt, looking at her own crooked stitches. This would make my mother weep. Wade sat down across from her, watching her hands work. Tell me about her. Your mother. Charlotte looked up, surprised he would ask. Oh, she was very proper, always worried about appearances and what people thought. But underneath all that, she had a kind heart. She used to sneak me books I was not supposed to read. full of adventure and mystery, things with some real excitement. Charlotte smiled, lost in the memory. She'd hide them in her sewing basket, and we would read them together when my father was gone for the day. Sounds like she understood you. Better than I understood myself sometimes. Charlotte put the mending down. What about your mother? You said she passed on when you were 12. Wade was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, she was strong. She had to be. Living out here with a man determined to build a life from nothing. She never complained, not when things got hard, not even when we had more hope than food. His voice softened. She used to sing while she worked. Couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but she would sing anyway. Charlotte laughed a little. Like me. Wade nodded. Yeah, like you. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, something passed between them. A quiet understanding, the shared sadnesses of two people who had both lost too much. I think she would have liked you, he said. She would have admired a woman willing to fight for what she believes in. A warmth bloomed in Charlotte's chest, both dangerous and sweet. This was how it happened, she realized. This was how you started to truly care for someone. It was in the small, quiet moments, the shared stories. It was seeing the real person underneath all the armor. She knew she had to be careful. But then Wade smiled at her, a real smile filled with genuine warmth. Charlotte felt the careful walls around her heart begin to tremble. We should get some sleep, she said quickly, standing up. Big day tomorrow. Good night, Wade. She hurried up the ladder to her loft before he could answer, before she could see the expression on his face. In her small sleeping space, she lay awake under Maria's quilts, trying to remember that this was all just a business deal, a temporary marriage that was supposed to end. It would all be over as soon as the land claim was secure. But somewhere between the city of Phoenix and this mountain cabin, something had changed. In the quiet rhythm of their days together, her feelings had begun to shift. Charlotte was starting to care for Wade Blackthorne in a way that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the man himself. And she had no earthly idea what to do about it. The inspector arrived at high noon on a Tuesday. He rode a fine bay mare with official government stamps on the saddlebags. Charlotte saw him coming from the window where she was pretending to read. In reality, she was watching the trail with a pounding heart. She called out to Wade, who was splitting wood out back. He's here! Wade set down the axe and wiped his hands on his pants. Remember what we talked about? Married 3 months, living here for 6 weeks. We're happy, settled, and building a future. I remember, Charlotte said softly. She smoothed her dress and tucked a stray hair behind her ear, trying to calm her racing heart. Everything depended on this. For the next few hours, their future was in the hands of the inspector. He was a thin fella in his 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the pale skin of a man who spent his days indoors. He called himself Mr. Desert Edmund Whitmore from the land office. His handshake was weak, like someone who'd never done a day of hard work in his life. Mr. and Mrs. Blackthorne, he began, pulling a leather notebook from his bag. I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice. Of course, Wade answered, smooth as can be. We're happy to help this process along in any way we can. Excellent. Just excellent. Now, I have a list of things to check. Your residence, any improvements, your farming, and of course that this marriage of yours is the real deal. Whitmore's eyes darted between Wade and Charlotte. I'm sure you know the government doesn't take kindly to folks trying to pull a fast one. We understand completely, Charlotte said, moving a little closer to Wade, hoping it looked natural. We have nothing to hide. And with that, Whitmore started his inspection. He measured every wall of the cabin, checked how it was built, and even watched the flow of the creek to document their water source. He looked over their little garden patch, which was mostly just dirt with neat rows, and he counted every last chicken in the coop. He even rummaged through their supplies. He noted the books they had on a shelf and studied the scuff marks on the floor, trying to figure out how they lived day to day. Charlotte felt like he could see right through her. Every little thing they had set up to look real now felt like a cheap costume. But she kept a calm face. She answered all his questions about her daily chores and what they ate for supper. Wade stayed right by her side, sometimes putting a hand on her arm. It was the kind of casual touch a husband would give his wife, and Charlotte leaned into it, even though her heart was pounding. So tell me, Whitmore asked, how did you two meet? Charlotte had practiced the answer 100 times, but her throat went bone dry. Just then, Wade's hand rested on the small of her back, a silent support. I was looking for work at the Broken Spur, Charlotte began. My father had just passed away, and I needed a job to get by. Wade hired me to help with the ranch paperwork. From there, one thing led to another. We found we saw eye to eye on things, Wade added. Charlotte is smart and not afraid of work. She understood the dream I was building out here. I'll be honest, the marriage started out as a practical matter. We each had something the other needed, but it grew into something more. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. More, you say? How so? Charlotte felt Wade's hand get tight against her back. This was it. The question they both knew was coming. If they claimed it was a grand romance, he'd never buy it. But if they admitted it was just a deal, they'd lose the land. The only way forward, she knew, was to tell a piece of the truth. The first man who ever asked to marry me swore he loved me, Charlotte said softly. Then he left me the second things got hard. Wade didn't offer me fancy words. He offered me honesty. He offered a partnership built on respect. That seemed a whole lot more real to me than a passion that could just burn out. She looked up at Wade then. He was looking right back at her, with something in his eyes she'd never seen before. And over time, she continued, that respect turned into caring. And that caring turned into trust. And that trust became something real, something worth holding on to. It was the truest thing she had ever said, and for a second, she forgot the inspector was even there. In that moment, it was just her and Wade, finally admitting something that had been growing between them all along. Whitmore cleared his throat, breaking the silence. I see. And you are both planning to live here for the full 5 years? Yes, they said at the same time. Very well, Whitmore said, scribbling in his book. I'll need to have a word with your neighbors, the Hendersons, I believe. I should have my report filed within 2 weeks. If there are no complications, your claim will be approved in about 90 days. Complications? Wade asked, his voice cautious. Well, there is a competing claim from a Mr. Harlan Crane. He's arguing he has prior rights to the water, and he's raising questions about how quickly you two got married. Whitmore's face gave nothing away. The land office will have to look into his complaints before we can make our final decision. Charlotte felt Wade's hand grip her back, hard as a rock, but his voice was steady. Crane's been trying to get this land for 20 years. This is just him being a nuisance, plain and simple. Well, the main office will have to sort that out, Mr. Blackthorne. But I'll be sure to note that you and your wife seem to be building a real home here. A genuine homestead with honest intentions. Whitmore snapped his notebook shut. I'd suggest you keep a record of every improvement. Take pictures if you can. And hold on to receipts for any materials. Anything to prove you're living and working the land. We will, Charlotte promised. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. After the inspector rode off, Charlotte and Wade just stood in the doorway. They watched him go, quiet as can be, until the trees swallowed him up. Well, that went better than I figured, Wade finally said. You think so? He seemed mighty curious about how fast we got hitched. Everyone's curious about that. Except you. Wade turned to her then. That part about respect turning into affection, that was real convincing. And maybe it was not a complete lie. The quiet between them felt heavy with things they could not say. Wade cleared his throat and took a step back, breaking the moment. I'd better get back to that woodpile. Winter's coming. But before he could finish, a gunshot split the air. In a flash, Wade had pulled Charlotte to the ground. She barely knew what happened. He shielded her with his own body, already reaching for the rifle by the door. A second bullet whined off the stone chimney, sending rock chips flying. Stay down, Wade growled. Inside, now! Charlotte scrambled through the door on her hands and knees, her heart hammering her ribs. Wade was right behind, slamming the door and dropping the heavy bar in place. Then another shot blew out one of their precious glass windows. Charlotte could not help but scream. The loft, Wade ordered. Get up there and keep your head down. And stay away from the windows. What are you going to do? I'm fixing to find out where those shots are coming from. He was already at the busted window, rifle ready, using the wall as cover. Charlotte, the loft, now! Her hands were shaking as she climbed the ladder, all her earlier calm gone. From up there, she saw Wade at the window, watching the tree line, his focus sharp as a knife. Two more shots rang out, fast. One hit the door, the other flew right over the roof. "4 of them," Wade called up to her. "Maybe 5. They know what they are doing. This is not some drunk cowboy taking pot shots. This is Crane." "It has to be," Charlotte said, her voice sounding braver than she felt. "His men, probably. Crane's too clever to show his own face." Wade fired a single shot, and the sound was deafening inside the cabin. Knowing it is him does not help us right now. The gunfire kept on for what felt like forever, but it was likely just 20 minutes. Wade only fired back when he had a clean shot, keeping them pinned down. All the while, Charlotte stayed put in the loft, clutching that little derringer in her sweaty hand. She watched Wade's back, praying this was not how their strange arrangement would end. Trapped in a half-built cabin, all because Harlan Crane wanted their water. Then just as quick as it began, the shooting stopped. Wade did not move from the window, staying tense and ready. "Could be a trick," he said, "trying to draw us out." "Or maybe they already did what they came for," Charlotte said, climbing down from the loft. "They've made their point, that they can get to us anytime." Wade's jaw tightened. "I'm riding to get the sheriff. This crosses a line. Not even Crane can talk his way out of an armed assault. And just leave me here by myself? What if they come back? You know how to shoot. You have the derringer and the extra rifle. Bar the door behind me." Wade was already getting ready, checking his bullets and strapping on his gun belt. "I'll be back before sundown with Sheriff Dalton and a few deputies." "Wade." He was in front of her in 3 quick steps, gently taking her face in his hands. It was so sudden, so tender, it caught her completely off guard. Whatever she was about to say just vanished. "I know you're scared," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "Heck, I'm scared too. But I need you to be brave for a little while longer. Can you do that for me, Charlotte?" She could only not, afraid her voice would break. "That's my girl." Then Wade leaned in and gave her a quick, firm kiss on the forehead. That was the first time his lips had touched hers since their wedding at the courthouse. He let her go and walked to the door. "Bar it behind me, and do not open it for anyone." Then he was gone, riding his sorrel gelding hard down that mountain trail. Charlotte slid the heavy bar across the door and leaned against it, her legs finally giving out from under her. She sank to the floor, that little derringer still clutched in her hand. She tried not to think about the busted window, the bullet holes in her new home, or the terrifying fact that Harlan Crane was a man willing to kill to get whatever he wanted. The afternoon dragged on, slower than molasses in winter. Charlotte reloaded the rifles, set the ammunition where she could grab it fast, and tried to watch every window at once. Every little sound made her jump, the wind whispering in the pines, the chickens clucking, the groan of the cabin log settling. She had never felt so terribly alone. Dusk was just settling in when she heard the sound of horses. Charlotte got into position by the broken window, rifle raised, her hands a whole lot steadier than she would have guessed. "Charlotte, it is Wade. I have Sheriff Dalton with me. Do not shoot." The relief that washed over her almost made her fall. She lowered the rifle, unbarred the door, and Wade came right in with Sheriff Dalton and 2 deputies following close behind. The sheriff was a gray-haired fella in his 50s, with the tired face of a man who had seen too much trouble and not near enough justice. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he said, tipping his hat. "Are you hurt?" "No, sir. Scared, but not hurt." "Well, that is good. Real good." Dalton took in the damage, the shattered glass, the ugly bullet holes in the walls. "Wade told me what happened on the ride up. This sounds like it was planned, not just some random trouble." "There were at least 5 men," Charlotte told him, "maybe even more. They had us pinned down for nearly half an hour." "And you reckon Harlan Crane sent them?" "Who else would it be?" Wade's voice was as hard as iron. "He has been threatening us for weeks. He warned me that accidents can happen to folks who get too ambitious. Son, thinking a man did something and proving it are 2 mighty different things," Dalton said, pulling out a notebook that looked so much like the land inspector's. Charlotte had to swallow a crazy laugh. "Did you see any of their faces? Recognize a horse?" Charlotte just shook her head, and Wade's face grew even darker. "They stayed back in the trees, too far away to see clear." Well, that gives us a problem. I can ride over to Crane's ranch and ask him some questions, but without a witness, he will just deny the whole thing. He probably has excuses all lined up for his men already. So what are we supposed to do? Charlotte asked, her voice rising. Just sit here and wait for them to come back and finish us off. No, ma'am. I'm going to post a deputy up here for the next week to keep an eye on things. And I will make it crystal clear to Crane that any more accidents will bring a world of trouble down on him. The sheriff's face softened a bit. I know it is not much. The law can be slow out here, and men like Crane know all the tricks. But I promise you, I will not let him get away with trying to murder you. Trying to murder us assumes they were trying to kill us, Wade said, his voice low. I think they were just trying to scare us, to show us we are not safe up here. And if you are not safe, you cannot live here, Charlotte added, the terrible truth dawning on her. The homestead claim says we have to live here continuously. If we leave the property, we lose it all. Exactly, Wade said, looking at Dalton. Can you prove he was trying to intimidate us? Conspiracy to interfere with a land claim. That is easier to prove than murder, but it is still tough. I would need one of his men to testify that Crane gave the order. And I doubt any of his crew are brave enough to turn on him. Dalton headed for the door. Let me go have a talk with him, see if I can shake something loose. In the meantime, you two need to decide if you want to stay here with a deputy watching your backs or head back to the Broken Spur until this all blows over. After the sheriff and his deputies rode off, leaving one man to camp by the creek, Wade and Charlotte sat at their busted table in the growing dark. Neither one had lit a lamp. The twilight just felt safer, like they were hidden. We have to stay, Charlotte said at last. I know. If we leave, even for a day, Crane wins. He can tell everyone we abandoned the homestead, that we were not serious about our claim. I know, Wade said again. But staying here puts you right in the line of fire. That is not what I signed on for when I asked you to be my wife. Charlotte looked at him across the table, his face hidden in the shadows. You asked me to help you get this land. That is exactly what I am doing. I asked you to help with paperwork, not to risk your life. Sometimes, she said, reaching across the table to find his hand, they are the same thing. She reached for his hand in the dark, and his rough, warm fingers closed right around hers. I am not leaving, Wade, not unless you are giving up on your father's dream. I do not care about the dream if it gets you killed. The words hung between them, heavy as stone. Charlotte felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the one thing they had been dancing around for weeks. The truth that somewhere between a business contract and a marriage license, between shared meals and quiet talks, they had started to actually care for one another. This was not just a partnership, it was something deeper and more dangerous. Wade, do not, she whispered. His hand tightened on hers. Do not say a thing. Just let me get us through this. We are setting up a watch. It is just you, me, and the deputy. No one is ever alone. We will write down every threat, every single incident. We will build a case so strong, Crane's lawyers cannot touch it. And we will hold this land until the claim is approved, or until hell freezes over, whichever one comes first. And after the claim is approved and you do not need a wife anymore? Wade was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, let's survive this first. Then we will figure out the after. It was not a declaration of love, not even a promise, but it was something. It meant that the after mattered to him too. It meant this arrangement had become something neither of them was ready to end. The deputy was a young man named Foster. He looked barely old enough to shave, but he was good at his job. He set up a patrol around the cabin, checking the tree line. He checked it every few hours, keeping a rifle close. Wade nailed boards over the broken window and moved furniture to give them better cover if the shooting started again. Charlotte cooked dinner over a fire that felt too bright, too exposed. She tried not to jump at every sound from the woods. They ate in a heavy silence. Then Wade insisted on taking the first watch while Charlotte tried to sleep in the loft. She lay awake for hours. She listened to Wade's footsteps on the floorboards and the low murmur of his voice as he checked in with the Deputy Foster. The little Derringer was under her pillow again. It was a cold comfort. She must have fallen asleep at some point. because she woke to Wade's hand on her shoulder and the gray morning light coming through the window. "Your turn," he said quietly. "I need a few hours." Charlotte climbed down to find Wade already on his bedroll, asleep almost before. His head hit the folded blanket he used for a pillow. Exhaustion was carved into his face, and Charlotte felt a fierce need to protect him. The feeling surprised her with its strength. This man had risked everything for this land and his father's dream. The least she could do was let him sleep safely. She sat by the window with the rifle across her lap and watched the sunrise. The beauty of it all felt wrong somehow. Not after the violence of the day before, but the world does not care about the troubles of people. The creek kept running, the birds kept singing, and the wildflowers kept blooming. No matter who owned the land, Deputy Foster came inside around mid-morning, looking tired but alert. "All quiet overnight, ma'am, but I found tracks by the creek. 5 horses, maybe 6. They were watching the cabin after dark." Charlotte's stomach twisted into a knot. They did not leave. Not far, anyway. They are still out there. "Should I wake Wade?" "No," she said. "Let him sleep a while longer. I will keep watch." Foster gratefully accepted the coffee she poured for him. "If you do not mind me asking, ma'am, why is this land so important? Important enough to risk your life for?" Charlotte looked at Wade sleeping by the stove, at the bullet holes in the walls, at the simple life they were trying to build in this cabin. "It is not about the land itself," she explained. "It is about having something that is yours, something no one can take away just because they are richer or stronger. Out here, that is the only kind of freedom that matters." Foster nodded slowly. "My people always said the West was built by people too stubborn to quit. I guess you and Mr. Blackthorne fit that description." Charlotte smiled a little. "I guess we do." The day passed quietly, but she could feel eyes watching from the forest. Crane's men were still out there, waiting for another chance to run them off. Wade woke in the afternoon and took over the watch, his face grim and determined, and sent Foster to get some rest. That evening, as Charlotte fixed dinner, Tommy rode up with supplies from the Broken Spur. He also had a letter that put a thundercloud on Wade's face. "What is it?" Charlotte asked. Wade just handed her the paper. It was from Harlan Crane's lawyer, officially telling them Crane was trying to stop their homestead claim. He was accusing them of a fraudulent marriage pending an investigation. He claimed they never really intended to live there. The letter pointed to how fast they got married and moved, raising so-called credible concerns about whether their claims were legitimate. "He's doing the exact same thing he did to your father," Charlotte said, her anger burning hotter than her fear. "He's trying to tie us up in legal battles to make it too expensive to fight." "Well, I am not my father," Wade said, his voice cold as ice. "And this time there is a paper trail. Sheriff Dalton is investigating the shooting. The land inspector gave us a good report, and we are not going anywhere." Tommy shifted his feet, looking uneasy. "Boss, Miguel sent me. Some of Crane's men have been hanging around the Broken Spur, too." "Nothing has happened yet, but they are watching the place. They are asking questions about you and Mrs. Blackthorne." "Looking for ammunition," Charlotte said. "Something they can use to prove our marriage is a fake." "Let them look," Wade said, his jaw set in that stubborn line she was starting to know. "They will not find anything, because there is nothing to find. We are married. We are living here. We are building a life. That is all the law requires, and that is what we are going to keep on doing." After Tommy left, Wade and Charlotte sat on the cabin's front step. It was the safest place for fresh air, with Deputy Foster patrolling out back. They watched the stars come out. The violence of the past 24 hours hung heavy between them, but so did something else. A shared determination, a partnership that was born out of desperation, but was now being forged into something much stronger. "I have been thinking," Wade said after a long silence, "about what happens if Crane pushes this further. What if he does not just shoot to scare, but shoots to kill?" Charlotte's blood ran cold. "Do not. We have to face it. If something happens to me, you need to know what to do. The ranch is in my name, but I will add your name to the deed. Equal ownership. If I die, everything goes to you. The Broken Spur, this homestead claim, everything. Miguel knows how to run things. You know the finances. You could sell it, or keep it, or stop. Charlotte's voice broke. Stop planning for your death. We are going to survive this. Wade looked at her, and in the starlight, his eyes were softer than she had ever seen them. I hope so, but if we do not, I need you to know that this— He gestured at the cabin, the land, and the mountains rising dark against the star-filled sky. This was not a mistake. Marrying you was not a mistake. Even if it ends badly, even if Crane wins, even if— Charlotte kissed him. She did not plan it, did not even think about it. She just closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his, stopping his dark planning. It was the most effective way she could think of. For a second, Wade froze in surprise. Then his hand came up to hold the back of her head, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. This was nothing like their courthouse kiss, which was just part of the deal. This was real. Wade's other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Charlotte went willingly, her hands balling up in his shirt. He kissed like a starving man, like he had been holding back for weeks and had finally broken. And Charlotte matched his desperation, because she had been holding back too. She had held back the feelings that grew despite her best efforts, the care that blossomed despite their contract, the love that had taken root in the cracks of their practical deal. When they finally broke apart, breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. Charlotte, do not analyze it, he whispered. Do not make it complicated. Just accept it happened. It changes things. I know, the contract said— To heck with the contract. Charlotte pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Wade, I came out here expecting to survive, to find a cure, to be safe. I did not expect to care about you. I did not expect to want this marriage to be real. But I do, I truly do, and I'm just hoping you feel the same. Wade's calloused thumb gently brushed against her cheek. I kept telling myself I was only marrying you for this land, for practical reasons. But the truth is, I have been fooling myself for weeks now. Maybe since the moment you stood in my yard and demanded the plain truth instead of fancy words. His smile was a little crooked, a little vulnerable. You scare me, Charlotte Blackthorne. You make me want things I had long given up on. She whispered, what things? A real marriage, he said. A real life. Someone to build this dream with, not just get by on my own. Charlotte felt tears welling up in her eyes. Those are the things I want too. They kissed again, slower this time, full of promise. Charlotte thought about the winding road that had led them right here. A wild idea, a business deal of a marriage, and a slow, steady change from pretend to something real. If someone had told her just 2 months ago that she would be sitting on a bullet-marked porch kissing a quiet rancher under the Arizona stars, she would have called them crazy. But here she was, and she had never felt more sure of anything. That is, until Deputy Foster coughed from around the corner. They jumped apart like a couple of teenagers caught sneaking around. Sorry to interrupt, Foster said, his voice flat, but I saw something moving in the trees. Thought you ought to know. Wade was on his feet in a heartbeat, his hand on his gun. How many? Can't say for sure. Just shadows. Could be deer, or it could be men. Charlotte stood up, that perfect moment gone in a puff of smoke. They are coming back. Maybe, Wade said, or maybe they are just watching us again. He went inside to get his rifle. Foster, you watch the north side. I will take the east. He looked at Charlotte. I know, she said. Get in the loft, stay low, and keep away from the windows. She made sure her little derringer was loaded. I am not helpless, Wade. I know you are not, but He seemed to be fighting for the right words. Instead, he walked over, gave her a hard, fast kiss, and said, just stay alive. We have got a lot to talk about after this is all over. You too, Charlotte whispered back. They took their places, and the waiting started all over again. But this time was different. Charlotte was not just fighting for a contract or a piece of land. She was fighting for a future. The future she had just realized she wanted more than anything. The one where this marriage was the real deal, where she and Wade built a life together, where the life they were pretending to have became the one they were actually living. The shadows out in the woods crept closer, and Charlotte held her pistol tight, ready for anything. The shadows slowly turned into men. 4 of them, on horseback, moving through the trees like they knew exactly where they were going. Charlotte's heart pounded against her ribs as she watched them from the loft. The little pistol felt heavy in her sweaty hand. Wade was downstairs at the east window, his rifle at the ready, while Deputy Foster kept an eye on the north side of the cabin. "Do not fire unless they fire first," Wade called out, his voice ringing out clear in the quiet mountain air. "Foster, you see anything?" "2 more riders, boss. Coming up from the creek. We are surrounded." Charlotte's stomach sank. 6 men against the 3 of them, and she was one of the 3, with barely any practice and a gun only good up close. If a fight broke out, their chances were not looking good. Then a voice called out from the darkness, smooth and all too familiar. "Blackthorn, I am here to talk, not to fight. Tell your people to hold their fire." Wade's whole body tensed up. "That is Crane himself," he said under his breath. "He came all the way down here personally. That arrogant fool thinks we will not shoot him." But Wade yelled back, "Show yourself, Crane, and keep your hands where I can see them." Harlan Crane rode into the clearing on a beautiful pale horse, his hands held up high like he was peaceful, but nobody was buying it. His men stayed back in the trees, just dark shapes holding rifles. In the moonlight, Crane looked like a kindly old grandpa with his white hair and fancy clothes. He looked perfectly clean, even after riding through the woods. Only his eyes gave him away. They were cold, sharp, and had not an ounce of kindness in them. "Quite a welcome party," Crane said calmly. "You would think I was a bandit instead of your neighbor." "Neighbors do not shoot up people's homes," Wade shot back. "What do you want, Crane? I am here to offer you one last chance to see reason." Crane got off his horse like a man half his age. "I have filed a court order against your land claim. My lawyers tell me it will have no problem going through. There are just too many things wrong with your paperwork. The very suspicious timing of your marriage, for one. The rushed way you moved in, and all the clear signs of fraud." "That's a lie," Charlotte yelled down, her voice sharp. "We are legally married, and this is our legal claim." Crane looked up at her, his smile thin and nasty. "Well now, Mrs. Blackthorn, tell me, how much is he paying you to play wife? It must be a pretty penny to risk your neck out here." "Nobody's paying anybody," Wade cut in, "and you're on my property. State your business or get off my land." "Your land?" Crane chuckled. "You really think you can win this, don't you? Succeed where your daddy failed. Let me tell you how this is going to play out, Wade. My court order will tie up your claim for at least 6 months. You'll be stuck up here through the rains and snow, all while trying to run your ranch. You'll bleed money trying to do both. Sooner or later, you'll miss a mortgage payment or a residency check or make one tiny mistake, and that's all it'll take. And when you do, I'll be there to buy the broken spur at auction for pennies on the dollar." "So that's your plan," Charlotte said. "Just grind us down until we break." "That's not a plan, sweetheart. That's just the way things are." Crane got back on his horse. "But I'm feeling generous. I'll give you $40,000 for the broken spur in this claim. You can walk away clean and avoid all the trouble that's coming." "No," Wade said flatly. "You don't even have to think about it?" "No, now get off my land before I'm forced to remove you." Crane's face went hard as stone. "You are making a huge mistake. I tried to be reasonable. You remember that when things get ugly. Remember I gave you a chance to just walk away." He spun his horse and rode back into the woods, his men following like ghosts. The clearing was quiet again, but the air felt heavy with his threat. Deputy Foster stepped out, his face pale. "He's fixing to do something awful." That was his last warning. "I know," Wade said, his voice grim. He looked up at Charlotte. "Come on down. We need to have a talk." The 3 of them sat around the table, facing the hard truth. Crane had the money, the lawyers, and he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. They had a pretend marriage, a few friends, and a dream that was starting to feel more like a nightmare. "Y'all could take his offer," Foster said quietly. $40,000 is a whole lot of money. You could start over somewhere far away from him." "No," Charlotte and Wade said at the exact same time. They looked at each other, and she saw the same void in his eyes that she felt in her heart. They had come way too far to give up now. Then we need proof, Charlotte said. Something solid that ties Crane to the shooting. Something that shows he's been sabotaging claims for years. Sheriff Dalton can't do a thing without it. Crane's too slick for that, Wade said. He pays other folks to do his dirty work. Everybody makes mistakes, Charlotte insisted. Even a man like Crane. What about his men? The ones who actually did the shooting? They're the weak spot in his chain. Foster leaned in. You'd have to get one of them to talk. That ain't gonna happen. Crane pays him too well, and they know what he does to people who cross him. Unless, Charlotte said slowly, we give them a better reason. What if we could prove Crane is planning to turn on them? That he's gonna let them take the blame for everything? Wade raised his eyebrows. You've got an idea. The start of one. Crane is smart, but he's also proud. He came here tonight because he wanted to watch us squirm. That kind of pride makes a man careless. Charlotte started pacing. He filed that court order through his lawyers. There has to be a paper trail. Letters, notes, something we can use. If we could just get our hands on those papers. That's breaking the law, Foster said, looking worried. I can't be a part of that. You won't be. You'll be right here guarding this claim, Charlotte told him. She looked at Wade. But you and I could take a ride into town tomorrow. Pay a visit to Crane's lawyer. Pretend we want to talk about a deal. Something downright crazy. It was a plan full of holes and riding on pure luck. But Wade was already nodding his head. A big grin spread across his face. It's so wild. He will never see it coming, Wade said. Crane thinks he has us cornered. He is not expecting us to fight back. They stayed up all night working out the details. Charlotte would ask to meet Crane's lawyer, a fella named Bartholomew Sutton, who had an office over in Phoenix. She would claim she wanted to talk a deal behind Wade's back. That would play right into what Crane already believed about their marriage being a sham. He would figure Charlotte was just a scared girl looking for a way out. While she kept Sutton busy, Wade would be searching that office for some proof. It was a wild gamble that could land them both in jail, but just sitting there meant letting Crane wear them down to nothing. This way, at least they were making their own luck. They rode out at sunrise, telling Deputy Foster they were heading to the Broken Spur to check on things. It was not a complete lie, as they would stop by on the way home. But first, they had to get inside that lawyer's office and pray they found something useful before they got caught. The long ride to Phoenix took them most of the morning. Charlotte practiced her part the whole way. She had to play the unhappy wife, trapped and looking for an escape. It was not too hard to act scared and lost, even though the part about it being loveless, well, that part was not true anymore. She caught Wade looking at her as they rode, his face hard to read. What is it? She asked. Just thinking, he said. You are not the same woman who showed up looking for work. I am the same person. No, ma'am. That woman was running from something. Now you are running towards something, fighting for it. Wade gave a small, real smile. It suits you. A warm feeling spread through Charlotte's chest, pushing back the fear. We could fail, you know. We could end up in jail for this. Then we will fail together, he said softly. That has got to count for something. They got to Phoenix in the afternoon and split up. Charlotte went straight to Sutton's office. Wade slipped into the alley out back to wait. Charlotte kept her hands steady as she walked up the stairs to the second floor and knocked on the glass door. It read Bartholomew Sutton, attorney at law. The man who opened it was younger than she figured, maybe around 40. He had slick hair and the kind of sharp eyes that were always adding things up. His smile was polite as he let her in. Mrs. Blackthorne, what a surprise. Please have a seat. Can I get you some tea? No, thank you. Charlotte sat on the very edge of the chair, trying to look nervous. I need to talk to you privately, she said, about my husband's homestead claim. Sutton's eyes lit up. I am all ears. This marriage, it was a mistake. Wade needed a wife for his claim, and Charlotte let her voice tremble a little. I just needed a safe place. I did not know what I was getting into. It is so lonely out there and dangerous, with Mr. Crane's men always around. I want out. I see, Sutton said, leaning back in his chair to size her up. And what is it you want from me? I need to know my options. Could I get an annulment? Would that void the claim? And if I were to say the marriage was a fake, just a business deal, would that help Mr. Crane's case against him? It was the perfect bait, everything Crane would ever want to hear, and Sutton's face showed he was biting hard. Mrs. Blackthorne, you do know I work for Mr. Crane. Anything you say can be used against your husband. I know. That is why I am here. Charlotte wrung her hands in her lap. I just want to go home, back east, away from all of this. Sutton stood up and walked to a file cabinet. Let me just get Mr. Crane's file. We will talk this through and see what we can arrange. The second his back was turned, Charlotte looked over at the window. She could not see Wade, but she knew he was out there waiting for his cue. She got up and walked to it, playing with the latch like she was nervous. Then she pushed it open. My, it is stuffy in here, she said, apologizing. Do you mind? Not at all, Sutton said, his head buried in his files. He pulled out a thick folder. The label read, Blackthorne Homestead, Challenge. Charlotte's heart pounded. That was it. That was the one they needed. Now she just had to keep him talking. Just long enough for Wade to slip it throated with that camera. Mr. Sutton, she began, before we get down to brass tacks, I need to know something. If I testify against my husband, will Mr. Crane promise to keep me safe? I am mighty worried about what he might do. Sutton turned, a slick, calculating look on his face. Mr. Crane is a man of reason, he said smoothly. I am certain we can arrange for your protection, but first you have to tell me exactly what you are willing to say. For the next 20 minutes, Charlotte spun a heartbreaking story of lies and fear, her stomach churning with every word she spoke. She claimed Wade had threatened her, forced her into this marriage with empty promises. It made her sick to her stomach to betray him, even with a lie. But she had to keep Sutton's eyes locked on her, keeping him distracted from the window where Wade was now quietly climbing inside. Wade moved like a ghost, his boots making no sound at all on the floor. He ducked behind a huge bookshelf, completely hidden from the lawyer's view. Then Charlotte saw him pull out a small camera from the newspaper office and start snapping pictures of the pages in the file Sutton had left wide open on his desk. This is all very helpful, Sutton was saying, completely fooled. But I will need you to sign a formal statement we can show to the court. Of course, I will do whatever it takes. Charlotte stood up and moved to the desk, pretending to look at the papers. In truth, she was blocking Sutton's view of Wade. Should we do that right now? Sutton reached for the file. Let me write something first. It needs to be worded just right for the most impact. And at that very moment, Wade sneezed. It was a tiny sound, but in that quiet office, it was as loud as a gunshot. Sutton's head snapped around. His eyes went wide when he saw Wade stepping out from behind the bookshelf, camera in hand. What in the... Security! Sutton lunged for the door, but Charlotte was faster. She grabbed his arm, using all her strength to pull him off balance. Sutton stumbled and cursed, and in a flash, Wade was there, pinning the lawyer's arms behind his back. Sorry about this, Wade said, sounding surprisingly calm. But we really needed those documents. You are both out of your minds. This is breaking and entering. It is assault. And what you have in that file is conspiracy and fraud, Charlotte shot back. She snatched the folder from the desk. She flipped through the pages, her eyes getting wider by the second. Wade, look at this. Letters from Crane telling Sutton to delay the homestead review. And here are instructions on how to bribe the clerk at the land office. She pulled out one page, her hand shaking. It is a contract with someone named John Davies to discourage homesteaders by any means necessary. Wade, that is a hired gun. Crane hired a man to shoot at us. Wade's grip on Sutton tightened like a vice. Who is John Davies? I have no idea what you are talking about, Sutton spat. Then you will not mind if we take this file to Sheriff Dalton. Charlotte was already stuffing the papers into her bag. I reckon he will be very interested to learn about your client's business. You cannot. That is privileged communication between a lawyer and his client. Not when it is evidence of a crime, Wade said, and conspiracy to commit murder cancels that privilege. They left Sutton locked in his own office. They took the key and jammed the door from the outside to buy themselves some time, then ran for their horses. Charlotte's hands were shaking so badly she could hardly get up on Buttercup. Wade helped her, and then they were riding as fast as they could for the sheriff's office. The stolen papers bounced in Charlotte's saddlebag. Sheriff Dalton took one look at their panicked faces and pulled them right into his office, shutting the door. Charlotte dumped the whole bag out on his desk, papers and photographs, all damning proof of Crane's corruption. "Where in God's name did you get this?" Dalton asked. His weathered face was as serious as a heart attack. "Sutton's office," Wade admitted. "We broke in." "Good Lord," Dalton sighed, sinking down into his chair. "I cannot use evidence you got illegally in a court of law." Charlotte's heart plummeted. "But it proves everything. The bribes, the hired guns, all the years of sabotaging good people's claims." "I know what it proves," Dalton said, holding up a hand as Wade started to protest. "However, it does tell me exactly where I need to start digging. I can use this to get warrants, talk to witnesses, and build a real case that will stick." "Well, you've given me a place to start. How long is this going to take?" Wade asked. "Weeks, maybe months." "We don't have months. Crane's whole plan goes through in 3 days." Dalton studied the papers, a worried look on his face. "There might be one way. This name right here, John Davies. I know that man. He's one of Crane's own ranch hands. Been with him about 5 years. If I can get him to talk." He looked up. "He's going to need protection. The real kind. He'll probably have to move after the trial. That is a mighty big thing to ask of a fella, but it could work." Charlotte leaned in. "If Davies talks, Crane is finished. If Davies admits Crane ordered the shooting and all the other trouble, and I can back it up with these papers you found, yeah, Crane is done for. His injunction gets thrown out. His whole empire starts to fall apart, and y'all get to keep your homestead." Wade and Charlotte looked at each other. It was not a sure thing, but it was a chance. "Do it," Wade said firmly. "Bring Davies in." Dalton stood up, already grabbing his hat. "I am going to need a few days. You two need to lay low somewhere safe. Not the homestead, and not the broken Spur. Crane will figure out you hit Sutton's office, and he will come looking for you." "We can stay at the boarding house," Charlotte said. "Mrs. Kowalski's place. She has got a tight lip." "Good, you stay put there. Just keep your heads down and let me handle this." Dalton's face softened a bit. "Y'all did good today, even if it was not exactly by the book. Now let me finish this the right way." For 3 long days, they waited in a tiny room at Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house. Wade paced back and forth like a caged wolf, while Charlotte tried to read, but she could not focus on the words. At night, they shared the small bed. It just felt right after everything they had been through. Wade held her tight, and they both pretended to be asleep. "Whatever happens," Wade said on that third night, his voice low in the dark, "I need you to know, marrying you was the best thing I ever did." Charlotte turned in his arms and found his lips in the darkness. They kissed, slow and gentle. Charlotte felt tears on her cheeks. She had finally found something worth fighting for, and it felt like the whole world was trying to tear it away. "We are not going to lose," she whispered. "We have come too far to quit now." The next morning, Sheriff Dalton showed up at their door with news. "I got him. Davies agreed to talk. We promised to keep him safe and move him. He is scared of Crane, but he is more scared of a rope for what he did. We got his statement, we got proof, and I got the papers to arrest Crane." Wade grabbed Charlotte's hand. He squeezed it so tight it almost hurt. "When?" "Right now. My deputies have Crane's ranch surrounded. I'm heading out to bring him in, and I want you all with me. You have earned the right to see this." They rode out together, Dalton, 4 deputies, Wade, and Charlotte. The Triple C Ranch was spread out all over the valley's best land. You could see the money in every fence post. Crane's men watched them ride up with tired eyes, but not a one of them made a move. Dalton got off his horse and walked to the main house. Crane came out onto his porch, looking perfect as always. But Charlotte saw the worry around his eyes. He knew, somehow he already knew his time was up. "Well now, Sheriff, to what do I owe this little party?" "Harlan Crane, I am placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, and fraud, and about a dozen other things I will tell you about on the way to jail." Dalton pulled out the handcuffs. "This is ridiculous. Who has been talking?" "John Davies for one, and Bartholomew Sutton for another. He started singing the second he knew your ship was sinking, and we have the paperwork to prove it." 20 years of your dirty dealings. Dalton stepped closer. You can come along easy, or you can come along hard. But either way, you are coming with me. For a long moment, Crane just stood there on his porch, his whole world falling apart. Then his shoulders slumped, and he held out his wrists for the cuffs. You think you have won, he said. He said, looking right at Wade, but it takes more than being stubborn to run this land. You will fail without me to push against. Then I will fail on my own terms, Wade said quietly. Not yours. They watched the sheriff lead Crane away, and that knot in Charlotte's stomach finally came undone. It was finally over. Crane was under arrest. The injunction was finished. Their homestead was safe. They had won. Right there in Crane's own yard, Wade pulled her close, holding her like he might never let go. We did it, darling, he whispered into her hair. We really did it. We sure did, Charlotte answered, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. Together. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of legal papers. Crane's arrest opened up a whole can of worms, showing just how deep the corruption ran in the government. The investigation that followed went through Phoenix like a wildfire, cleaning house. Several officials at the land office stepped down. Sutton lost his license to practice law, and Crane's crooked empire started to crack. People he had wronged for years finally felt safe enough to speak up. The homestead claim was approved with no more trouble. A month after Crane's arrest, Wade and Charlotte got the official deed. They rode up to the cabin together to celebrate. Summer was turning to fall, and the grass in the meadow was a beautiful gold. You could smell the first hint of winter in the air. This is really ours now, Charlotte said, standing in the doorway of the home they fought for. No one can ever take it from us. Ours, Wade agreed. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You know, I've been thinking about that. Charlotte turned around in his arms. Thinking about what? Our contract, the one we signed that first night. Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded paper. It was worn soft from being carried around. It says you're free to leave with 6 months' wages now that the claim is ours. So I reckon you're free to go. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. Do you want me to go? Heavens, no, Wade said, holding her a little tighter. But I want you to stay because you choose to. Not because some piece of paper says you have to. So I am asking you, Charlotte Blackthorne, will you stay married to me? Will you build this life with me, not as a business deal, but as my real wife? Tears started to blur Charlotte's vision. You are proposing to me, but we are already married. Then I am proposing we stay married for real this time, for love. Wade's smile was a little crooked and unsure. What do you say? Charlotte took the contract from his hand, walked over to the stove, and dropped it right into the fire. They watched it burn together, the words turning to black ash. When it was all gone, Charlotte turned back to Wade and said, I say yes. I have been saying yes since the moment you first kissed me under the stars. Wade kissed her again, slow and deep, and Charlotte felt the last of her walls just crumble away. This was what she had been looking for when she left Philadelphia. Not just a way to survive, not just a job, but a place to belong, a person to build a life with, a love that was worth every fight. They spent that autumn finishing the cabin. They put in a real floor and added a second room. The Hendersons became frequent visitors, along with other homesteaders now free from Crane's shadow. The broken Spur was doing better than ever under Miguel's watch. Wade split his time between the ranch and the homestead, building them both up. Winter came early that year, covering the mountains in a deep snow. With Maria's help, Charlotte learned to cook a decent meal, and she learned to ride a horse without looking like she would fall off. She even got to be a good shot, protecting their little flock of chickens from coyotes. She handled the books for both properties and built a name for herself in Phoenix as someone who could sort out tangled finances. She even started helping other homesteaders with their own claims. And every single night, she fell asleep in Wade Blackthorne's arms, thankful for the wild chance that brought her here. Spring came with an explosion of wildflowers in the meadow. One morning, Charlotte woke to the sound of Wade already up and about downstairs. She climbed down the loft ladder, which they had kept even after adding the new room. She liked having her own private space. She found him at the table with a coffee and the newspaper. There is an article in here about Crane's trial, he said, sliding the paper over to her. The jury found him guilty on all counts, 30 years in the territorial prison. Charlotte read the article, and all she felt was relief. Crane would spend the rest of his life in prison. His empire would be given back to his victims, his name a warning about greed. Justice was slow, but it had finally arrived. "Good," she said simply. Wade pulled her onto his lap, his arms warm around her. "So, Mrs. Blackthorne, what should we do with our first spring as official homesteaders?" Charlotte looked out the window at the land they had fought so hard for, at the life they had built together. "I was thinking we could make the garden bigger, maybe plant some fruit trees, and I heard the Hendersons are selling a milk cow. How would you feel about getting a cow?" Wade sounded a little amused. "I want a future, Wade. I want to build something real that will last. Trees that will still give us fruit when we are old. A garden that feeds our family through the cold winters. A life that—" She stopped, her hand moving to her stomach, where the first tiny flutters of life had just begun. A life that we can pass on to someone else. Wade froze right where he stood. "Charlotte, are you telling me?" "I am saying that by next winter, we are going to need another room on this cabin. We have to make space for 3 people instead of 2. Wade's eyes went wide, then lit up with pure joy. He stood up, lifting her right along with him. He spun her around in their small cabin while she laughed. When he gently set her down, his hands held her face with such tenderness. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. We really are." This business deal of theirs was becoming very complicated. The best complication I have ever signed up for. Wade kissed her softly. "I love you, Charlotte. I should have said it a long time ago, but I love you." "I love you too," Charlotte whispered back, "even though you proposed to me with a business contract and a sunset deadline." Wade chuckled. "Hey, that proposal got you to say yes, did it not?" Charlotte laughed, and the happy sound filled the cabin they built together. It echoed across the land they fought for, and into the future they were creating, one day at a time. She had come west to escape scandal and ruin, just desperate for a way to survive. But she had found something so much better. She found a partnership, a purpose, and a love that grew in the most unlikely place. Years later, when their daughter would ask how Mama and Papa met, Charlotte would tell her the whole truth. She would tell her about a desperate woman who answered an impossible proposal, and about a hard man who offered honesty instead of pretty words, about a marriage that started as a contract but became a sacred promise. She would tell her about standing together against threats and violence, about taking documents from a crooked lawyer's office, about watching justice finally catch up to evil men. But most of all, she would tell her about the moment when a business arrangement turned into real love, when 2 strangers, married out of necessity, chose each other out of pure devotion, when a marriage of convenience transformed into the greatest fortune either of them could have ever imagined. The Arizona sun set over their homestead, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. And Wade Blackthorne stood on his porch with his wife in his arms, his hand resting on the small curve of her belly. The land stretched out before them, hard-won and deeply loved. And for the first time in his life, Wade understood that some gambles are not really gambles at all. Some risks are just fate disguised as a choice, leading you exactly where you were meant to be. "You asked me for a job," Wade said, his words echoing a time that felt like a lifetime ago. Charlotte smiled, her eyes shining bright. "And you gave me everything." They stood together as the twilight fell, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds. They built a life worth living from nothing but stubbornness, courage, and love. The West was a hard and unforgiving land, but it rewarded those brave enough to fight for what they wanted. And Charlotte and Wade Blackthorne had fought for this, for each other, for their land, and for their future. And they had won. The stars came out one by one over the Arizona mountains, like they were watching over a love story that began with a desperate bargain and ended with everything 2 hearts could possibly hold. And in the warm glow from the cabin window, shining against the vast darkness of the frontier night, that was more than enough. It was everything.